Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku was the accused villain part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, 𝗵𝗃 from WhatIf. So let's start the video. It's been a while since we had rescued 𝗂𝗍 from overhaul, and everyone has felt a sense of peace except the constant threat from the League of Villains as it was nearing the end of the second semester of UA. They have made several attacks against heroes and even have had another attack against UA as well. Izuku wasn't dumb though, as he knew that UA believed there was a traitor that was selling information to the League of Villains that allowed them to commit all of these attacks on UA, which combined with their other attacks on heroes across Japan has made them a fearsome name. Though what Izuku didn't know is that he was about to be asked a large request that would change so many things, and he didn't know if he would recover from it. The government and UA were getting tired of the attacks. As such, officials in the government and the Hero Commission approached 𝗍𝗍 with a plan, and it was a plan that was so shocking that he outright rejected it, and they asked him to provide a different plan. 𝗍𝗍 tried coming up with a new plan in his mind with his quirk, but then he realized he couldn't. He realized they were up against the walls with their backs to it. The current path they were on to the future was one with a dead end right in front of their faces. As such, in the meeting with the president of the commission and the prime minister of Japan, who had become involved in the matters, he looked at them both and spoke. "You are right, I hate to say it, but you are right. If we do this, it's going to be with a lot of demands, because this could go wrong on so many levels that whoever we send could end up dead, and it wouldn't be honorable and justifiable to leave their name dirty if they died in the field. The problem is with picking the person to do it, since we need to be careful of not selecting the mole themselves," Principal 𝗍𝗍 said, and they both nodded their heads since this mission would carry so much risk. What was the mission, you may ask? Well, the mission was to accuse someone of being a traitor to Hero Society who had sold UA out. Once that was done, they would allow them to escape from custody so they could get picked up by the League of Villains, which would allow them to have a mole inside of their organization. The president of the commission looked at 𝗍𝗍 and asked if he knew of anyone that could be easily cleared and trustworthy for the mission. 𝗍𝗍 sat there and thought of who could fit the role, and he paled a bit, which they couldn't notice due to his fur, but a name had come to mind, and it would be devastating if they had this person join this plan. However, it was also the most logical choice. The name that came to mind was Izuku Midoriya. There were many reasons his name came to mind, and it was because he was already cleared by the detective due to the numerous encounter they had, which allowed the detective to question Midoriya multiple times, which cleared him of any involvement with the League. There was also the fact that he was the protege of All Might, which would be a devastating thing that would interest the villains. There was the fact that he had a cruel backstory, since 𝗍𝗍 knew the figures about quirkless children and Midoriya used to be quirkless. There was the fact that Midoriya had grown greatly with his quirk usage and his overall intelligent mind. There was the fact that they could easily set him up as a fake traitor if he agreed due to his notebooks and his past. There were so many reasons why Izuku Midoriya would be the best fit, but also the worst fit, because there was a risk of him truly turning if he did end up breaking, because this mission would destroy any connections he had, this mission would destroy any friendships he had, this mission would destroy his bond with All Might, this mission would destroy his hero dreams of being the #1 hero. Even if the commission and government cleared him later on, there was a chance he wouldn't recover from. What he would need to do is he played the role of the villain. There is someone that had already been cleared due to the interactions he had with the police detective who has the lie detector quirk, who is in charge of the League case. We would need to be careful of the detective though, since he could blow a hole in this entire mission. The individual I have in mind also has a backstory and everything that would help us frame him perfectly for being the mole. The only reason he never did break due to his life was his will and determination to be a hero overpowered everything else in his life, which always did make him an amazing hero, but it's also what we can use to paint him as the mole if he agrees to go on this mission, Principal 𝗍𝗍 said, and they asked who this individual was. 𝗍𝗍 was hesitant to say Izuku's name, so he spoke one more time. "If we do this, he has the right to say no to the request. I trust him to keep this mission a secret if he rejects it. I also request that he has the right to pull out if it goes too far for any reason. We would also need to inform his mother, since it would destroy her, since he's the only thing she has left, and we could end up driving her to suicide if we screwed this up. He also has the right to make any demands that we need to agree with before he does this mission, and even makes demands during and after. Is that agreeable? 𝗵𝗃 asked, and both the commission president and prime minister nodded their heads. 𝗵𝗃 sighed as he was about to condemn Izuku Midoriya if he accepted this mission, and he knew Izuku Midoriya would most likely accept it if it meant protecting his class, and that scared 𝗵𝗃 on how far Izuku Midoriya was willing to go for his class, to protect them, to ensure that they got to graduate alive. The student we can ask to undertake this mission is Izuku Midoriya of Class A. There are many reasons he would be perfect for the role, but we will need his agreement to do this and plan this out. Principal 𝗵𝗃 said as he started to explain the reasons why Izuku Midoriya would be the perfect person to help them accomplish the mission, and soon they came to an agreement. They would now plan how to meet Izuku Midoriya without raising flags and ask him to join the mission. As 𝗵𝗃 walked out of the meeting that afternoon, he looked up at the sunset that was on the horizon. I wonder how many sunsets will pass until I will have my student back by the end of this. Principal 𝗵𝗃 thought as he knew he had just condemned his student who he fully knew would accept this mission, and somehow Izuku would convince his own mother to condemn her son to a high chance of death. 𝗵𝗃 walked down the steps from the government building where he had met the president of the commission and the prime minister and got into the car that he had waiting for him. After instructing the driver to take him back to UA, 𝗵𝗃 sat there in silence as he thought of everything that was now going on. He had agreed to talk to Izuku Midoriya with the other two in a few days at his home because 𝗵𝗃 knew Izuku had a request to return to his mother's home in a few days and none of the other students would be leaving campus. As such, it was the perfect time to talk to Izuku Midoriya and his mother alone without anyone else finding out. As 𝗵𝗃 pulled up to the school, he exited the car and watched it drive off. As he turned to look at the school itself, he knew that in a few days everything would change, and he wondered if he would come to regret his decision in a few days or a few months. The thing he did know was that he needed to enjoy the last few days before he would be spending the future nights waiting up in fear that he would be receiving a message alerting him of the possible death of his student. Now, 𝗵𝗃 isn't one that gets attached to humans, but Izuku Midoriya is different. Due to the past that they both have had, 𝗵𝗃 has grown fond of watching the boy grow, as 𝗵𝗃 was planning to take the young boy on as a personal student once the new semester started, but that wouldn't be able to happen anymore due to this mission. 𝗵𝗃 sighed silently as he walked towards the building and enjoyed the sounds of everything going on around him, but he soon made it to his office and started drafting agreements and other paperwork that he knew they would need soon. While all of that was going on, Izuku sat in his room with a bad feeling. He knew this feeling well and understood something major was going to change, and he wondered if it had to do with One for All or something else. He kind of hoped he didn't get another quirk since he already had Float, Black WHP, and One for All itself. Can't put too much focus on something I don't know, now can I? Izuku thought as he laid down on his bed and decided to go to sleep early. Izuku Midoriya spent the next few days going about as if everything was normal, but the feeling in his gut had grown to be much larger. It was as if something was going to happen today when he went home, and he didn't like the feeling of that, but he couldn't do anything about an issue he couldn't see directly in front of himself, so he had to just bear with it and push forward. As Izuku spent some time that Saturday morning, he looked over at all of his friends and smiled as he looked at each of them. He then looked at Kaken and smiled even more as the both of them have become somewhat friends and rivals now instead of how they used to be in the past. As Izuku looked at the time, he noticed it was time for him to go home for the day since he would be returning before the end of the day, so he would make it back before curfew. Izuku got up and people noticed and asked him where he was going. I request a day to go back to Mom so I could visit her. It's been a while and we've been busy with everything that has happened, so I wanted to visit her for a while now and today was approved. As such, I need to go since the next train will arrive in about minutes and the station is a 5-minute walk. Izuku said as he grabbed his bag and put his shoes on. They all told him to have a nice day in all of their own forms. Bakugo's was a grunt and Todoroki's was a nod of the head. Izuku smirked and waved goodbye as he left through the door. As Izuku went out the gates and was close to the station, a black car pulled up to him and Izuku went on guard as he noticed it slow down the closer it got to him. Then the window went down and there was his principal. Principal 𝗵𝗃. Izuku asked and 𝗵𝗃 nodded his head. Nice job on being alert and noticing the car as we approached, though I would like you to get in because we have much to talk about with your mother. Principal 𝗵𝗃 said as he opened the door, and Izuku looked at it for a while before he got in as his principal waved his hand. Izuku entered the call and noticed a few people that he recognized. Izuku entered the call and noticed a few people that he recognized. "My apologies for being rude, Prime Minister and MDM President," Izuku said as he bowed his head when he noticed the two in the car with him and Principal 𝗍𝗂. "My apologies for being rude, Prime Minister and MDM President," Izuku said as he bowed his head when he noticed the two in the car with him and Principal 𝗍𝗂. Though, Izuku was really concerned and confused on why such big-name individuals were in a car with his principal who he just got invited into the car to ride with. "I take this isn't a social drive since it's weird to find such big names without any guards nearby that I've noticed, or at least they are doing a good enough job of hiding if there are any around," Izuku said as he looked at the three individuals in the long car with him as Principal 𝗍𝗂 had moved to sit closer to the other two passengers. "On top of everything, like always, Izuku Midoriya," Principal 𝗍𝗂 said with a smile that Izuku noticed looked sad and that set alarm bells off in his mind. Izuku then looked at the faces of the Prime Minister and MDM President of the Hero Commission and noticed they were slightly tense as well. "Without a doubt, this isn't a social call. It's a professional call, but the problem is I can't think of what you three would want of a freshman at UA. Would you please enlighten me since you all seem tense?" Izuku said as he analyzed the situation. All of them looked at each other and Principal 𝗍𝗂 spoke up. "We will need your mother's involvement in this decision, but I will give you the basic now before we arrive at your home. Izuku Midoriya, on behalf of UA High School, the Public Safety Commission, and the Japanese government, we are hereby requesting you to undergo a mission and infiltrate the League of Villains as a mole by being framed as a traitor to Hero Society and UA." Principal 𝗍𝗂 said, not sugarcoating it since he knew Izuku Midoriya would prefer that he didn't. Izuku's eyes widened for a few moments before he took a deep breath in and breathed out. He looked at each of them in the eyes and then lowered his head. "I see you are going to have to explain in detail, and if I somehow agree to this then I will have a lot of conditions that I want to be met. But the problem will be convincing my mother to agree to this since I had no plans on keeping her in the dark on this." "Understood," Izuku said, and they all nodded their heads. After sitting in silence for a while more, they arrived outside of Izuku's home and they got out and headed to the Midoriya's apartment. Izuku used his key to enter without knocking since he didn't want the government officials to be seen. As they entered, they all made their way to the living room and Izuku called out for his mother. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in, sweetie. Why is the Prime Minister of Japan doing in my living room? Also, is that the president of the commission with your principal, sweetie? What did you do?" Inko said as she turned to her son with wide eyes. 𝗍𝗂 just spoke up before it could devolve. "Midoriya, please calm down. Your son hasn't done anything wrong, it's more like he did everything right, which is the problem in this case. We are here to get your permission to have your son go on a long-term mission that will have consequences to you, to him, to everyone depending on his this mission goes. That is why we need to speak to you both at the same time," Principal 𝗍𝗂 said, and Inko sat down after making some tea and providing everyone some. She sat there and asked what long-term mission he was talking about. 𝗍𝗂 sighed and started to speak. "I am sure you are awfully aware of all the attacks the League of Villains have done on the hero world and the school itself. It's our suspicions that we have a traitor in UA or someone high up in power that allows the League of Villains to gain information to plan these attacks. But regardless if there is a mole or not, we need to bring this organization down, and they keep giving everyone the slip. That is where we want your son to come into play," Principal 𝗍𝗂 said, and then MDM President started to speak and took over the conversation. "What we are asking is that your son allows us to frame him as a traitor to UA and the hero world, which will allow him to integrate into the villain underground and get recruited by the League of Villains. This would allow us to gain valuable information on the League and bring them and other organizations to an end. As such, this means that he would be out of contact with you and publicly framed and denounced as a villain who had been selling information to villain organizations on heroes. That is why we are here, because we need your son to agree and your permission for this," stated the president of the commission, and Inko was in shock. "No, absolutely not," Inko said, and then she felt Izuku's hand on her leg and she looked at him. "You can't be, you are wanting to do this, Izuku?" she asked in disbelief, as her son would more or less be throwing away his dreams. She even said as much to him and he nodded his head. I am not agreeing with it right this second, but it's a strong feeling that I am likely wanting to agree to do it. The league keeps hurting people and keeps coming after my classmates. They are like a family to me and I want them to feel safe for once, and that won't happen with the league out there. I am not agreeing today, but I want to think it over for the rest of the week and decide it, because I know if I do this I will be gone for a while, even years, depending on how quickly we could bring their organization down. Izuku said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was in shock. You are asking me to condemn you to most likely death. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, and he nodded his head, but told her that the field of heroics was always one filled with death more than others. Soon they all talked for a while and Izuku laid out basic conditions that would have to be met if any deal would be met. These conditions include: 1 was that this would be on the records of an official mission, but only with a few people knowing about it. This was to stop the government from just wiping their hands clean of him if things went south. The government would provide 𝗵𝗃𝗃 and Izuku Midoriya money to hire one of the top legal firms that the government would pay for, as the legal team would represent the Midoriya family, so his mother would have legal help in the event things happened that she needed a good lawyer. The government would protect Izuku Midoriya and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 Midoriya from any lawsuits or criminal charges for anything that happened due to his actions that tied anyway to the mission. Izuku Midoriya would be provided a full hero license at the completion of the mission. At the end of the mission, all crimes and everything else would be cleared from Izuku Midoriya name, and a public statement would be made by UA's principal 𝗍𝗍, the Prime Minister, and the President of the Commission, confirming the mission so no one could try and hold Izuku as a traitor after the fact. They agreed to the terms, and 𝗍𝗍 asked why a full hero license at the end of the mission instead of returning to hero school to finish. Principal 𝗍𝗍, we both know that there is a high chance that they won't forgive me at the end of this. I will need to actually fight my own classmates and injure them. I will try to hold back if I can, but sometimes I won't be able to if they push me strong enough. As such, any trust will be gone, and even then it will likely feel weird for them to have me in the room since they fought me as a villain. There's a good chance I wouldn't be socially accepted by any hero school. This way I can still become a hero even if I can't do it as a limelight hero and have to go to underground heroics instead. Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍 nodded his head and agreed that there was indeed a good chance that he might get rejected by his friends and teachers even when his name was cleared. Soon the meeting came to an end and Izuku was asked to give a final answer by the end of the week so they could start planning how they would out him as the traitor if he agreed. Now it was just 𝗵𝗃𝗃 and Izuku sitting in the room, and they were both silent. She sat there and looked at her son and asked him if he was sure of this. Honestly, no, but my past as a bullied quirkless child who developed their quirk late and everything else makes it the perfect story to why I turned. UA also had some screw-ups during my time there which would feed into whatever story we came up with as well. I also have the skills and knowledge needed to do what I would need to do as well. I want my class to be able to relax for once, and I know I am likely throwing my dream of being the #1 hero away if I do this as well, but I want to help keep them safe and they need someone to do it. Izuku said as he sat there and grabbed his mother's hands. He knew this would be devastating for so many people and he wondered if anyone would be left for him at the end, but as long as he had his mother and 𝗍𝗍 who believed in him, then he believed he could make it through it all even if everyone else left him, because if they were safe then that is what mattered the most to him. Soon they agreed to relax for most of the day and enjoyed the time they had left the best they could. As the day came to an end and it was time for him to return to UA, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 looked at him and spoke. If you believe it's for the best, no, I will be waiting for you at the end. Just please be careful and try to check in with me as best as you can so I know you are still alive and not dead somewhere. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said as tears fell down her face. Izuku nodded his head and hugged his mother and told her that he would let her know when he made a decision and what it was before he told Principal 𝗍𝗍, since they would need to sign documents and everything. Soon, Izuku made his way back to the train and went back to UA and put on a smile as he entered the common rooms and joined everyone for the remaining portion of the night since they would have school the next day. As Izuku Midoriya was sitting in his dorm room thinking over the request he received a few days ago, he knew that if he made the decision to do the mission then everything he was working for was gone. He likely would never use one for all to uphold society like All Might wanted from him, which was the biggest thing that held Izuku back since All Might gave him one for all to uphold society as a symbol. However, unknown to Izuku, the past users of One for All heard this entire thinking and knew all the details he was told about the mission since they were a part of him. As such, they got the exact information he knew and they felt that they needed to make their will known. This decision led to Izuku finding himself within One for All once again like he has been a few times before, but this time it was different as all of the users were present and visible. This decision led to Izuku finding himself within One for All once again like he has been a few times before, but this time it was different as all of the users were present and visible. Izuku noticed two users were facing the wall and hiding their faces for a reason. Izuku decided he wasn't going to question it since the users must not want him to know about them. It was most likely due to something they did, or they might not just like him. For example, Izuku was betting they may have been a bit more extreme in their actions back in the past since the quirk riots and all of the chaos. This would likely lead to them believing Izuku is too reckless, too forgiving, and many other things due to how their time shaped them, which Izuku was fine with for now, but he did hope to talk to them one day so he could understand them. Izuku tried moving around and saw his feet were stuck in place, but he was able to move his arms and head. I see my mouth isn't blocked like last time. Is it due to the percent control I have? Izuku muttered out loud and they all chuckled and told Izuku that he was correct in his assumption. Suddenly a chair appeared and Izuku found himself sitting in it just like all of the other users were sitting down outside of the two in the back. May I ask why I am here? Izuku asked and the first user smiled sadly. As you know, we are a part of you. This means we get fed information from the current user body such as memories if we choose to look for it, and unless you are doing something indecent we are typically always watching so we can constantly know how things are in the living world. As such, we know about the mission you've been asked to complete and your thoughts regarding All Might, said the first user, and Izuku's eyes widened a bit but he quickly controlled his emotions and just watched as the users spoke up in and started to speak about his worries. 𝗵𝗃 looked at Izuku as she spoke and he held eye contact with her as well. Izuku, I want to correct something about One for All that you hold in your mind. One for All was never meant to be used to uphold society as Toshinori has done. Its goal, its purpose was to defeat All for One and his associates. I believe you can understand the issue if every single One for All user started to appear at the top of heroics due to our quirk, which only grows stronger and creates a larger gap from others that are ranked lower. It's why I kept myself lower in the ranks around the top in my prime, since I didn't want to create the effect Toshinori has done where everyone was too reliant on him. Nana said, and Izuku was confused as Izuku knew parts about how All Might gained One for All and that it was his dream to become the symbol of peace, and Nana nodded her head hearing Izuku's thoughts. Indeed, it was fine for one or two users to do it as he did, but even I didn't think he would create such a large gap between himself and the other heroes that they became so reliant on him that all of this chaos is going on now due to the loss of All Might himself. As such, One for All isn't meant to uphold society. It's fine if you do as a hero, but you shouldn't create such a large gap between yourself and others, so it would be good to hold back in appearance sakes even if you did become the #1 hero. Though what I really want to hit on about is, it really your dream to become the #1 hero, or was it to just save people, which you can do at any rank? Even as an underground hero? Nana said, and Izuku stopped himself from speaking out and he thought it over. She was right, he let himself get sidetracked by All Might's words and ideals of supporting society. Once he had retired, that Izuku forgot what he as an individual had wanted to do, and what Izuku had always wanted to do was to save people. He never had set conditions on himself for saving people or requiring himself to only being able to save on him having to be the #1 hero like All Might was. That only came after he received One for All. I see you are understanding one of the reasons we brought you here. Indeed, you lost sight of your original goal of wanting to become a hero, and now you have found it again. Now the question lays with, do you accept the mission even though you may never be trusted by your current friends and teachers again? Do you walk away from All Might and deal with the scorn you will receive until the truth comes out? Even then you may still be hated by All Might and others. Do you sacrifice your current standing with them and help protect them from the associates of All for One by painting yourself in darkness? Asked 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁, who Izuku knew as the 4th user since All Might had been doing some research into the past users. Izuku looked at his hands and clenched them. Do you think he will forgive me in the end? Do you think any of them will welcome me back at the end? Izuku asked as a tear went down his face. Nana walked over to Izuku and hugged him. She just stood there rubbing his back as everyone was silent because no one knew if they would welcome him back. They hoped they would since they could see Izuku had made his mind up. He had made the decision on what he was going to do after the discussion with the past users. Izuku Midoriya had come to the decision to accept the mission that was asked of him because he wanted to protect his friends, the people he saw as a family. He just prayed that they would be there at the end for him, but even if they weren't, Izuku knew that the past users minus All Might would be there for him regardless. Soon Izuku calmed down and looked at them all and nodded his head. You have your decision now, and you know we will always be here for you. Before you go back, is there anything you want to ask us before you go, since we don't know when the next time we will meet? Asked the first user, who looked proud of Izuku's decision to forsake his own happiness and dreams to protect those he considered family and bring an end to the associates of All for One, but he was also sad at the same time since Izuku could see it in the man's eyes. The first user was sad that Izuku would have to push away all of those he cares for. Izuku thought it over for a while and asked if anyone had a good villain name for him to use, and they all chuckled. The sixth user, who Izuku's never found the name of, spoke up and suggested a name. Play the role in its fullest, as you shall become the accused in their eyes, so you might as well take it as your name. You will become the villain that will be known as accused, suggested the sixth user, and Izuku found the irony of the name so well. He will be accused of crimes he didn't commit, forced to commit crimes, help the villains so that he may protect his friends and family that he has made at UA. Izuku nodded his head and thanked them for helping him bring his mind at ease, even though he was sure he would be in turmoil in the coming days. As the conversations came to an end, Izuku noticed that the two users in the back were now turned halfway around. Interesting, I must have met some sort of test of theirs to bring them to that point, but I can think on that another day, Izuku thought as he started to vanish. The users all waved at him goodbye, and Izuku soon found himself awake the next morning. Izuku looked at the clock and noticed it was a few hours before he would need to go to class. It's been a few days since I've been asked to do the mission. It's time I give my answer so I can enjoy my remaining days here before it's time to leave, Izuku thought as he pulled his phone out and called his mother. As she answered the call, she knew why he was calling and asked him the question on her mind. You came to a decision, haven't you? She asked him, and Izuku said he did and he will be agreeing to do it. She said she understood, as she only asked that he would come back to the house a few more times before the plan actually started so she could enjoy her time with him. Izuku agreed and said he had some things to tell her as well. Izuku planned to tell her about One for All since it had played a part in making his decision and she deserved to know. Bakugo, his childhood bully, knew about it while his own mother didn't. Again, it was kind of his mistake on saying what he did at the start of the year, and Bakugo then being told by All Might without asking Izuku's permission, but still, Izuku Midoriya deserved to know the full truth. Izuku soon ended the call with his mother and got dressed early and headed off towards the school so he could stop at Principal Nizu's office. As Izuku walked up to the door, it opened and Nizu was sitting there. You seem stressed, sir, Izuku said as he noticed Nizu seemed off. It likely was due to the mission request that he made to Izuku, which Izuku couldn't blame him for being stressed since it was a large matter. Nizu was more or less condemning Izuku in a sense, because if Shigaraki ever found out he was a mole before Izuku escaped, then it was a death sentence. Nizu welcomed Izuku in and offered him some tea, which Izuku accepted. They both sat there in silence as they enjoyed the warm tea with the sun shining through Nizu's office windows. Izuku finally decided to break the silence in the room as he spoke first. I'll do it, Izuku said as Nizu's eyes widened. Nizu knew Izuku would likely accept the mission, but it was still a shocking matter that it was strong not to be surprised about. Are you sure once you start this there will likely be no coming back? Your relationships with them all will be damaged and you risk them never trusting you, never wanting to be friends with you, they likely won't ever forgive you, never wanting to be near you, and some may even want to scorn you even when the truth comes out in the end. Nizu asked, and Izuku smiled as he nodded his head. I am sure though, I want to visit my mother a few more times before we start this so she can enjoy the reaming time with me since I have a large chance of death. There's some other matters I want to take care of as well, like slowly preparing Eri for my departure. I would also like to set up a system in the event I might be discovered so I can at least try to escape before I get killed if I believe they discovered that I am a mole, and many other things, so we will need to plan this out quite well. Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗂 nodded his head and said he would approve Izuku to go to his mother's for the entire weekend since they didn't have classes this weekend due to a staff meeting and other things. 𝗍𝗂 also said he would inform the Prime Minister and President of the Commission of his agreement so they could start making all the paperwork with everything else that they would need for the mission. 𝗍𝗂 said to come back to his office at the end of the day so they could start planning things out since they would need to be careful with how they pull this off, which Izuku agreed with. As such, Izuku headed off to class as if nothing had changed when in fact the entire world had changed for him with that decision he had just made. Izuku arrived in class and saw everyone there. They asked him why he wasn't with them for breakfast and Izuku waved it off. "I needed to go talk to a teacher about something so it took me a bit of time," Izuku said, and they asked about what it was but he said it was personal, which raised a few eyebrows but he just ignored them. Might as well start setting the stage for the show, Izuku thought, as he knew he would need to craft his actions over the next month or so to make this entire plan work out. The first was to start making his actions seem slightly weird without them being large signs of him having changed, as it would set the stage for what he has done or was accused of. "I hope you all can forgive me one day for what I am about to do," Izuku thought in his mind as Izawa-sensei walked into the room. Izuku truly hoped Eraserhead would forgive him the most because even though he wouldn't admit it to others, Izuku saw Eraserhead as somewhat as a father figure in his life since the man was so dependable. Even though Izuku was close to All Might, that man had made some screw-ups that had prevented the relationship from ever reaching that level of trust. Izuku wishes he could also tell Eraserhead about OFA, but with the mission happening that had gone out of the window since Izuku had planned to let Eraserhead know during the start of the new semester that was coming up soon. Now though, everything was already moving too fast to bring Eraserhead into the truth, as it would complicate matters. The day came to an end without anything else major going on throughout the classes, but when Izuku was about to leave to go meet up with 𝗍𝗂, his friends asked him if he wanted to go hang out in one of the gyms. Izuku smiled at them but shook his head. "I have some plans today with a teacher that I need to handle. It relates to what I was talking about with them this morning and I don't know when I will be done talking, but if I get done at a good time then I will text and ask you where you guys are at and come join you." "Okay?" Izuku asked, and they nodded their heads and thought nothing of it, though Izuku could see his teacher give him a curious look, though Izuku ignored it. As such, Izuku left the classroom and made his way through the hallways towards the staff room, but he didn't enter it. No, Izuku went this way to give his friends a slip, since if he didn't go this way he would have walked with them, which would seem odd if he needed to talk to a teacher who would have been in the staff room. Izuku doubled back around towards the principal's office, which was on the other side of the building with more administrative rooms, since the staff room was purposely near the classrooms for the teachers to get to easier between classes. Izuku walked into 𝗍𝗂's office without knocking since he knew 𝗍𝗂 would be ready for him. As he entered, 𝗍𝗂 brought him into a separate room that was hidden behind a bookshelf. "Nice hidden room, how many staff know about it?" Izuku asked, and 𝗍𝗂 said none, since this leads to his hidden home, which Izuku realized that he nor anyone actually knew where 𝗍𝗂 lived. 𝗍𝗂 chuckled at seeing Izuku's face, and soon they arrived at 𝗍𝗂's home after going up an elevator that was in the hidden room. "If we are ever talking in secret then we will meet here, since we can't have anyone discovering about this. I've set up some screens that we can use to talk to the Prime Minister and the President of the Commission, since we will do most of this via this method, since people would notice if we kept meeting in person for all of the planning." 𝗍𝗂 said, and Izuku nodded his head as 𝗍𝗂 told him that he was added to the system as well to get into the private home, and he would be given the hidden tunnels later so he could use them to get into UA if he needed to without being seen, since only he and 𝗍𝗂 would have access to the systems to get in via them. Izuku looked around the house and it was a decent floor plan. Izuku did ask 𝗍𝗂 how no one noticed this room out of the entire building, and 𝗍𝗂 chuckled and told Izuku that it was hidden with false walls between a floor that looks like a support structure for the entire tower when it fully a support pillar, but just made to seem like it was one entire thing that took up enough space to hide the home without the staff knowing about it. "They all know I live on campus somewhere but don't know where. Most think I have a home down underground, which is why I had the columns made like they were, which would support an underground section. It's kind of true, but the things underground are the hidden tunnels and some other rooms where I store stuff for big events that we need to prepare for," 𝗍𝗂 said, and Izuku nodded his head in understanding. Soon they sat down in front of some monitors that 𝗍𝗂 had set up in the dining room area. After a few minutes, the Prime Minister and the President of the Commission came on the screens and the meeting started. First, before anything, I would like to express our thanks Izuku Midoriya for your agreement with this plan since so many things could go wrong which could leave you dead or permanently injured," said the Prime Minister, and Izuku nodded his head and they got to work on making the plans. They went over the initial conditions that Izuku had provided and they were still in agreement with them. As they were talking, Izuku brought up a point that they needed to talk about. "I also need a source of money, which I know how you can provide me money. I can start up an information business in the underworld. This would also allow you to send me money by buying information from me, like my analysis of villains or heroes that you request from me. You would send a video or information you have on them and I would do an analysis and send it back. We could also use this way to hide the information I provide to the hero side as well, since it wouldn't be strange for me to sell information and send it out," Izuku said, and they all agreed that it would be a viable way to send information between the two sides. They would need to be careful on what they said to Izuku, but Izuku could hide his own information in the analysis with a code that 𝗍𝗍 could decrypt. As they began talking about how they would frame Izuku, it got to the point Izuku decided to make sure they all knew his past, since it would most likely come out during this mission. "𝗍𝗍, how much do you know of my past?" Izuku asked, which confused them all. 𝗍𝗍 looked at Izuku for a few moments and said what they knew. "Your quirk came in late at roughly the entrance exam of UA due to you need to put muscle on, which you didn't since you were classified as quirkless, so you didn't know that was the activation condition. As such, you spent a decade being assumed quirkless, which isn't an easy life due to discrimination in our country, which was deeply rooted due to past events." "Why?" 𝗍𝗍 asked, and Izuku nodded his head. "It will likely come out during this mission, but as you said, I was quirkless, which means I was heavily bullied and even suicide baited, but the issue lays with who went to school with me. Do you know what I am getting at?" Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍's eyes widened and said what Izuku was hinting at. "Katsuki Bakugo grew up with you, but I thought he was a childhood friend. The teachers never record anything since you were quirkless and likely blamed you for anything he did," 𝗍𝗍 said, and Izuku nodded his head. "I don't want you going after him for anything. He is growing and getting better, but I want to talk about this now since it will without a doubt get out, since the League will want to know details of my life that pushed me to betray Hero Society. It will likely hit him since he will blame himself most likely for what will happen," Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍 nodded his head and asked for Izuku to give them all the details of his life so they could know what to expect to be released by the League. As such, Izuku explained everything from the doctor's office, middle school, the suicide baiting by Kaken, then the initial meeting with All Might before he corrected himself and trained him. "I am sure Shigaraki will likely use the rooftop thing about All Might against him since he would want to rub it in his face," Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍 nodded his head as he agreed. Though, the entire details of Izuku's past also made it much easier for the League to accept Izuku as well without much doubt. "I want to bring someone in on the mission who will know about me being falsely accused. I would like to bring in Gran Torino, who trained All Might and trained me during the internship PRD as well," Izuku said, and they all asked why, but 𝗍𝗍 had an idea on why. "Multiple reasons. One is so that Gran Torino could support All Might after my betrayal, which will hit him strong. Second, Gran Torino is still an active hero who I would like you to assign to be on my case to hunt me down. This gives us some control over those hunting me. 3. Gran Torino will be able to swap information with me or help me escape if things happen and plans change. It will also do good to have an active pro hero on the field that could stop other heroes from killing me if we need to suddenly pull me out of the mission in the middle of a battle for some reason. It would also do good to have him in the knowledge when it comes time to reveal the truth, since he will be able to help clear things up with All Might, who will be at the end of this," Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍 chuckled a bit. They talked it over and agreed that Gran Torino would be brought in on the case in the coming days so he would be in full knowledge of what will be going on. They then started to talk about how the day of the attempt to arrest him will go down. Izuku suggested bringing in the lie detector user. They said that wouldn't work since he would see right through Izuku's lies, but Izuku shook his head, confusing them. "It's all about the question and answer for his quirk. If he asks me, are you the UA traitor, then all I need to say is, I agreed to be the UA traitor, which should ring as true since I am agreeing to be a traitor right now," Izuku said, and 𝗍𝗍's eyes widened. He then said they would need to control the questions so that nothing got asked that contradicted the statements. Soon they had the initial plans set up and started to get to work on everything, as 𝗍𝗫 would provide Izuku an untraceable laptop, except that he had a hidden device in it that Izuku could trigger for them to locate if he really had no other way. Izuku would do his work on the laptop as well. This device would be placed in a drop-off location that Izuku would go secure once the plan was set in motion. If anyone asked, he could just tell them he had retrieved it from his home before the police got to it. The government was also creating a fake case in regards to Izuku and using it to help make everything seem real for him being framed. They were using the notebook as the core evidence, which was flimsy as best, but it would provide them a way to question him due to the level of detail in the said notebooks. Then they all decided to take a break since they needed to get things moving on all sides, which would take a few weeks. They also needed to bring 𝗵𝘃𝗃 in as well, so he would be up to speed, which 𝗍𝗫 would take care of inviting him without alerting All Might or others until he was on campus. They would use the excuse that he was there to help Izuku with some training, which wouldn't be weird. Izuku soon met his friends up, who were currently hanging out in the common rooms playing some video games and enjoying their time. "Sorry, it took me so long. The meeting took a bit of time," Izuku said, and they said it was fine, but Izuku noticed 𝗍𝗫𝗃 was looking at him. "Must not believe my lie, since he would have been in the staff room where I never showed up." Izuku thought, but just went about his day and enjoyed himself because he knew this wouldn't last for long, as the current plans called for him to be accused in roughly 3 weeks. "I really hope they will forgive me at the end of this," Izuku thought as he enjoyed the remaining time he had with them. Izuku just wanted to now enjoy the time he had left with his friends, as he prayed they wouldn't end up harmed by all of this in the end. Though, Izuku knew that some of them would take it harder than others, since he had helped Todoroki use his powers fully, helped save Uraraka at the entrance exam, helped Iida during Hosu, which Izuku knew he might see that all as pre-planned if Iida hatred grew too much. Things are about to become messy, Izuku thought as he relaxed with his friends. It was now Friday and 𝗵𝘃𝗃 had arrived on campus. All Might was scared when he saw 𝗵𝘃𝗃 arrive on campus and asked why he was there. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 smirked as he spoke. "What, don't like seeing your old mentor? You could at least call every once in a while," 𝗵𝘃𝗃 said, but then told them why he was on campus. "Principal 𝗍𝗫 wanted to speak to me in person for some reason. He said it was urgent and he needed my help, but wouldn't tell me without it being in person," 𝗵𝘃𝗃 said, which confused the teachers but just went with it. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 headed off from the staff room towards the principal's office and was about to knock when the door just opened for him. "I really hate how you do that," 𝗵𝘃𝗃 said as he walked in, but noticed how 𝗍𝗫 was tensed and seemed off. Now, none of the staff have noticed, since 𝗍𝗫 never let it really get to him in front of others, but 𝗵𝘃𝗃 knew quite well due to the sheer years of experience he had on all of the staff. "This isn't going to be good." 𝗵𝘃𝗃 sat down as he noticed 𝗍𝗫 didn't even offer tea like he always does, which sent alarm bells off in his mind. "𝗵𝘃𝗃, you have been requested to join the UA traitor case. Do you accept?" 𝗍𝗫 asked without any warning, and 𝗵𝘃𝗃 wondered why he would be involved. "Why me?" he asked, and 𝗍𝗫 said many reasons which he can't go into without him agreeing to join the plan, since if he knew anything and decided to speak about it before the goal was accomplished, then everything that would be risked would go up in smoke. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 thought it over, and he knew that 𝗍𝗫 wouldn't do something without having reasons to back it. As such, he really wanted to know why he was being pulled onto the case. After a bit longer he nodded his head, since it would be good to get rid of the mole quickly and he was getting bored lately. "Good, our mole is Izuku Midoriya," 𝗍𝗫 said, and 𝗵𝘃𝗃 paled at what he heard but snapped out of his shock as he said that it wasn't possible. 𝗍𝗫 nodded his head in agreement, which confused 𝗵𝘃𝗃, and then the door opened, which revealed Izuku Midoriya. "Let's take this conversation up to my home as we will explain what is going on," 𝗍𝗫 said, and they soon got up to 𝗍𝗫's home. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 was shocked to be welcomed into 𝗍𝗫's home, since he didn't ever let anyone in. Izuku just walked in without a care in the world, since he had been in the home quite a few times already during all of the planning and getting used to the tunnels that laid around UA. As 𝗵𝘃𝗃 stood there, he heard 𝗍𝗫 say that the desperate times called for it, since they couldn't risk anyone hearing the conversations. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 though shifted his focus to one Izuku Midoriya, who was sitting down on the couch. Explain why 𝗍𝗂 is saying that you are the mole brat, because if you betrayed Toshinori betrayed 𝗃 then I will kill you. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 said, and Izuku smiled a bit and spoke. I haven't betrayed 𝗂𝗃 nor All Might, but I will be. Our backs are against the wall. It's been decided to send someone undercover into the League of Villains. What better person than the former quirkless child who became All Might's protege, who has many reasons why he would have turned to the villain's side. I've accepted the mission at the request of Principal 𝗍𝗂, the Prime Minister of Japan, and the President of the Commission. One of my conditions was to bring you on the case so you would know the truth, since All Might will not be informed of the truth. You will be also assigned to hunt me down as well, which will allow us to control those that are hunting me so I don't get caught too soon or at all, since this will be a long-term mission. Izuku said, and 𝗵𝘃𝗃 was stunned, and he turned to 𝗍𝗂, who nodded his head and started to explain. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 listened to 𝗍𝗂 explain everything and he didn't feel well at all. Kid, you might not walk away from this alive. You know that, right? 𝗵𝘃𝗃 asked, and Izuku nodded. Heroics always carried a risk of death. I know this has one of the highest chances of me dying, but you also have to remember that this is the responsibility of 𝗃 as well. I talked to the past users near the start of the week and they support me in my decision. Izuku said as he explained what transpired in his vision with the past users and how they helped him realize his goal wasn't to be the number one but to save people, which he could do without being the number one hero. As Nana and the others said, 𝗃 wasn't meant to always be at the top of heroics. It's one thing for All Might to do it, but if I do it then they want me to hold back for appearance sakes, so the gap between me and others isn't large when I have full control of my quirk. It's why Nana didn't go past the top, since she held herself back in the ranks, since she didn't want them to become reliant on her overwhelming power like they did with All Might. Izuku said, and 𝗵𝘃𝗃 was stunned at what he heard from Izuku. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 still didn't like this at all though. Kid, what about your friends? You will end up fighting them and they might end up killing you on the battlefield. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 said, and Izuku froze as well as 𝗍𝗂 did, because neither considered that as an option. Izuku sighed and nodded his head as he agreed that they might kill him. That is a risk I didn't even consider about, Izuku muttered, but 𝗵𝘃𝗃 did hear it clearly. I don't know what will happen in regards to that, but there are no other options. If I don't accept, then they will go with someone else most likely, and I can't let them send one of my classmates to their deaths, since Shigaraki will have far fewer reasons to accept them. And can you truly say that someone stands a chance against all of their members plus the giant monster that we learned about since you captured Kurogiri? No one has the strength I have nor the speed to be able to have a chance to escape if things go south. Izuku said, and 𝗵𝘃𝗃 gritted his teeth. Fine. I will help this suicidal plan of yours. You better pull yourself out if you think they discovered you. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 yelled, and Izuku thanked him. They then explained how the plan would go down in the next few weeks. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 would stay on campus as a teaching assistant, but in truth, he is here to watch Izuku because of 𝗍𝗂's suspicions that he is the mole. If anyone questions it later, 𝗍𝗂 will say it's because 𝗵𝘃𝗃 knew how to quickly deal with Izuku Midoriya in combat, since he helped personally train him in the style that Izuku had adapted to use. As such, when it comes time to arrest Izuku, 𝗵𝘃𝗃 will be the one to fight Izuku and arrest him, which will happen during a class training or another good time to make it happen in front of others, since they wanted the news to spread of it quickly. They needed the League of Villains to catch word about it via the other mole or the media once it was released. They then explained the overall plan of selling information and how Izuku would support himself in the underworld. They would also have 𝗵𝘃𝗃 and Izuku meet up every once in a while to swap information if it can't be done on the computer, but also to confirm Izuku's state and if he needs to be pulled out. 𝗵𝘃𝗃 did ask how Izuku Midoriya felt about this, and he was told she accepted Izuku's decision since he was doing it for his class and family at UA. She doesn't like the fact that I will have a large chance of death, but yeah, Izuku said as he shrugged slightly since he couldn't say much about the entire thing with his mother. Izuku did inform 𝗵𝘃𝗃 that he did tell her about 𝗃. I couldn't keep that from her anymore, in all honesty, not when it played a huge role in me accepting this mission, Izuku said as 𝗵𝘃𝗃 nodded his head and just supported the decision since it was Izuku's quirk now. I had plans to tell Eraserhead at the start of the next semester, but that won't be happening now since this entire mission. It would complicate matters if I suddenly told him and then betrayed the school. He would find it highly unnormal for the mole to reveal that before getting caught. Izuku explained, which 𝗍𝗍 agreed with. We can maybe find a day to tell him in the future if he ever discovers the truth of this entire operation on his own. Until then we need to keep him and everyone else in the dark. I do expect Eraserhead to hunt you down though, since he will feel responsible for you turning when he might have been able to prevent it if he had noticed anything wrong with you. 𝗍𝗍 explained, and that had brought a smile to Izuku's face as he said he looked forward to playing cat and mouse with his teacher. This just earned an eye roll from Gran Torino as well as 𝗍𝗍. Gran Torino just sighed at the kid's willingness to sacrifice himself for his family he created at UA. Kid, you truly are the best hero out of all of us, Gran Torino thought as he kept reading all of the documents about the case he would be handling. Izuku left the meeting and went back to the dorms where he enjoyed the rest of the day while 𝗍𝗍 and Gran Torino kept talking and planning. It was decided that 𝗍𝗍 would do the questions and they would only allow the detective to verify if it was true or false, which would stop the detective from proving Izuku's innocence. All of the documents and agreements with the government were also finalized as well and certified. There was no way the government could back out and attempt to wash their hands of Izuku Midoriya at any moment of this mission or after. 𝗍𝗍 forced them to sign statements and had video recordings of everything that was talked about because he wasn't going to let Izuku be hanged out to dry on some off chance an official got scared of what was going on. Izuku also decided it was time for him to start easing Eri into the idea of him being gone for a long time. As such, 𝗍𝗍 had approved of him taking Eri out one day with Gran Torino watching them, which would stop anyone from saying anything against it. Izuku took her out about a week after the meeting with Gran Torino. Izuku decided that they would go to the park that Izuku would always take her to. "Hey, Eri," Izuku said, and she looked at him. "You know I will never do something to purposely harm you, all right?" Izuku asked, and she nodded her head and asked why he was talking about this. Izuku sighed and then started to slowly explain things without giving the plan away. Sometimes, people have to do bad things because their backs are against the wall. Because there were no more choices they could make but to push off the wall and dive headfirst into the chaos that awaited them. Izuku said, and she nodded her head and asked if his back was against the wall, and Izuku smiled. "Indeed, sweetie, and sometimes when people have their backs against the wall results in having to leave the ones that they care for the most. Do you understand, Eri?" Izuku asked, and she looked at him with a sad smile and some tears. She asked him if he was going away and he nodded his head. "I am Eri, but I promise you this, that no matter what I will always be your hero, but I will be away for some time because our backs are against the wall," Izuku said as he her horn, and she hugged him. Gran Torino, who was nearby, sighed. "Kid, you better walk away from this alive. Too many people are waiting for you to return once this is over." Gran Torino thought as he gripped his hands tightly and prayed for everything to not fail in the end. "Nana, please guide him in his darkest moments," Gran Torino said in his thoughts. Soon they spend most of the day making Eri happy as he told her that he would be leaving in the near future, but she couldn't tell anyone about their conversation, which she agreed with. As they headed back to UA, he took her aside before they went in and told her, "Remember, Eri, in the end, I will always be a hero because I am to save those I care about. Regardless of what you hear, I want you to remember I will always be a hero in the end, but more importantly, I will be your hero no matter what," Izuku said as he hugged her and apologized for having to leave her soon in the future. She nodded her head and hugged him back, but soon fell asleep since the day exhausted her. Izuku lifted her up and carried her back to the teacher's dorm since she stayed with his teacher Eraserhead. They thanked him for dropping her off and Izuku was moving to leave when Eraserhead called out to him. "Problem child, is everything alright?" Eraserhead asked, which caught all of the teachers' attention as they were confused on why he was asking that. Izuku gulped a bit, but that went unnoticed to all but Eraserhead. Izuku turned around with a smile on his face and said everything was fine. Eraserhead didn't look convinced for some reason that Izuku couldn't think of, but was saved by Gran Torino calling for him since they would do some training to see if they could give Izuku any last-minute edge for his future. "Ah, sorry sensei. Seems Gran Torino is getting annoyed at waiting, so I have to go, but sensei, thank you for caring. I mean it as it means so much to me." "Sorry," Izuku said as he walked out the door, which didn't sit well with Eraserhead for some reason. However, He didn't have anything that would prove something was wrong, but it still didn't sit well with him at all. Some of the other teachers all didn't seem convinced that nothing was wrong, but they would leave it to Eraserhead to figure out since he was Izuku's homeroom teacher. Izuku went about his time for the rest of the few weeks that he had left, and it was getting closer and closer to the end of the school year. Izuku sighed as he knew today was the day that it would all happen. He already sent anything really personal to 𝗍𝗫 to keep hidden in the event police or others got aggressive in how they handled his stuff. As such, nearly all of the notebooks but the one they would use to frame him were hidden away with 𝗍𝗫 since they didn't need them getting out. Izuku had said his goodbyes to his mother since he wouldn't be able to reach out to her anytime soon since she would be watched, and any messages he wants to be sent would go through Gran Torino later on, but they couldn't meet until the League trusted him enough to be on his own. Izuku was nervous because they adjusted the plans as best as they could to make this go smoothly. Izuku would be accused as the traitor right in the middle of a lesson, as Gran Torino will come and attack Izuku without notice. Gran Torino would not hold back, and Izuku would play the part of an innocent student until he ends up getting questioned in a room at UA. He would start to unravel the so-called hidden truth and turn it into the reveal of him having been selling out information of heroes onto villains by using his notebooks. Later he would end up escaping as they transport him with people that were in the loop of the mission and would help him escape by faking his breakout due to faulty quirk cuffs. The thing about these accusations was that they weren't going to actually claim he was a mole for the League but had just been selling information to anyone that request, which was still they would leave the assumptions made by others unchecked and allow them to think that Izuku had sold them out to the League as well. As the day went on, it was now after lunch since they wanted Izuku to be able to have food in his stomach since they didn't know how long he would be on the streets before the League found him. As everyone was told to go get dressed in their hero outfits for the heroic lesson that afternoon, Eraserhead and All Might would both be in attendance as it was already scheduled for them to be doing the lesson together. This was a perfect moment for it all to happen, as it would be out in the open of Ground Beta, which was the city training grounds that would provide Gran Torino room to attack Izuku in full force when he went into the training zone. As such, they were halfway through the training when it was Izuku's turn. He was teamed up with Todoroki against Iida and Kirishima. All of them were making their way out into their positions when they all heard a noise. Izuku turned around, and right when he did, he got kicked in the stomach. Everyone freaked out and wondered what was going on. Gran Torino yelled at the students not to get involved as Izuku stood up holding his stomach. DMN, he really isn't holding back, Izuku thought. Gran Torino, why did you attack me out of no dash? Izuku was saying, but Gran Torino just attacked again as Izuku dodged it, and soon Gran Torino's quirk went off as Eraserhead came into the field with the entire class and All Might. Gran Torino, what are you doing? All Might yelled out in shock, but Gran Torino just threw dirt into Eraserhead's eyes and blasted off into Izuku, kicking him again in the stomach, which knocked him on the ground as he pulled out quirk cuffs and placed them on Izuku. Good job, Gran Torino. 𝗍𝗫's voice sounded out and everyone turned to him. Eraserhead looked and demanded an explanation. Well, I called Gran Torino here to watch over Izuku Midoriya, aka the individual who has been selling information on heroes to the villains, 𝗍𝗫 said, and everyone went into shock at what they heard. Izuku started to deny it and say that was false, but 𝗍𝗫 pushed forward as planned. We have the evidence that we need to prove it, no point in denying it, as Detective 𝗵𝗃 is on his way. I am sure you are familiar with his quirk. It's called lie detector and will clear everything up, as you won't be able to deny the truth in front of him. We have the notebooks that show the information you were gaining and selling to villains, which likely ended up in the League's hands, no doubt. Then there are the mysterious times you went out to talk to a teacher but you weren't. Then there are the times that you were always involved with a League's attack. It seems quite a lot of dots lining up, no? 𝗍𝗫 said, and everyone just kept trying to deny it, while some like Bakugo were still in a state of shock. Even All Might was in a state of shock as he looked at 𝗍𝗫 as if he was crazy. Then there is also the issue of you having the perfect motives for being a villain as well, but we will talk more about that later on. Anyway, it's time to take you to be questioned, as the detective will be here soon. Any last words, because we both know you won't see any of them for a long time? 𝗍𝗫 asked, and it was honestly a double-meaning question since 𝗍𝗫, Izuku, and Gran Torino knew Izuku indeed wouldn't be back anytime soon, and this was the best chance to say anything. I am a hero. I will be back. Izuku proudly said, and 𝗵𝗃 nodded and told 𝗵𝗃𝗃 to take Izuku to the room that they had set up for the interrogation. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 did just as he was told and dragged Izuku away quickly so no one could talk to him. Izuku just kept shouting he didn't betray them and kept his act up and soon was placed in the room. While that went on, 𝗵𝗃 was still standing outside with everyone. I think it would be wise to end the day here, Eraserhead, as I am sure you and All Might will want to watch the interrogation happen. 𝗵𝗃 asked, and All Might walked up to 𝗵𝗃. You are wrong, young Midoriya would never betray us. All Might said, and everyone including Eraserhead agreed with it, as none of them could believe the resident Sunshine Child could betray them. However, Bakugo was silent and 𝗵𝗃 knew why. Bakugo knew everything that has happened to Izuku Midoriya, and it's going through his mind on if he had pushed Izuku Midoriya to do what he did. Sometimes people's backs are against the wall and they do what they must to survive. I believe that is the case that forced Izuku Midoriya's hand in regards to him gathering all of the information he did. I wish things were different. I do, All Might, but you will see once me and the detective question Midoriya that he did what I am accusing him of. 𝗵𝗃 said and walked away. Quite a few classmates of Midoriya asked if they could watch the interrogation as well. 𝗵𝗃 stopped as they asked that and thought it over and then nodded his head as he agreed to let them watch. After about minutes later, the detective came in and asked what the hell 𝗵𝗃 thought he was doing in front of everyone. 𝗵𝗃, what the hell is the meaning of this? I cleared Izuku Midoriya from being in contact with the League of Villains near the start of the year since he was involved with several incidents. You detaining him in front of everyone will destroy the trust they have in him, yelled the detective, and everyone's hopes went up at the detective's words, but 𝗵𝗃 shook his head. You questioned him if he had involvement with the League. I don't believe at the time he was involved with them but broke later on. I believe he has a large amount of information, the means to do it, and the possible motives to have done it as well. I believe he agreed to become a mole of sorts due to things piling up on him, though UA has a hand in creating this mess as we overlooked quite a few things that forced his hand. 𝗵𝗃 said, and the detective's eyes widened as 𝗵𝗃 believed it to be true. Everyone noticed the detective's face pale a bit and watched as he asked where they kept Izuku Midoriya at. 𝗵𝗃 showed him the room and the detective said they needed his parent or a legal guardian to be present. Izuku Midoriya has already been contacted and waived her right to be here as she has been informed of everything that was going on here, 𝗵𝗃 said, which was complete bullshit but wasn't a lie. Izuku was told that it would happen today, but she agreed not to show up since she might give something away. Everyone was shocked that Midoriya's mother wouldn't show up, and that startled them. The detective entered the room and so did 𝗵𝗃 as well with 𝗵𝗃𝗃. 𝗵𝗃 took control of the questions right away without letting the detective speak. Hello, Izuku Midoriya. Please state your name and age for the recorded. 𝗵𝗃 asked, and Izuku did just that as the detective said true. Now, can you confirm if this picture is of your notebook and it's yours? 𝗵𝗃 said as he showed a photo of Izuku's notebook in an evidence bag. Yes, Izuku said, and the detective said true. I am going to simply ask the question that is on all of our minds. Did you agree to be a traitor to UA? 𝗵𝗃 asked, and everyone tensed, and Izuku spoke up. I agreed to the position I am in since there wasn't really another option. Izuku said, and everyone froze and looked at the detective whose eyes were wide. True. He stuttered out, and everyone gasped that were on the outside of the room. All Might had fallen to his knees in shock, and Bakugo's eyes widened at what he heard. I had no intentions of harming anyone here at UA, but things happened, and this is where we find ourselves, isn't 𝗵𝗃? Izuku asked, and the detective said true again as everyone just watched. Indeed, I dug into your background and I can say you have many reasons to become a villain, but you held on for so long and became a provisional hero, 𝗵𝗃 said, and the detective uttered a true which shocked everyone as they wondered what was in Izuku's past while Bakugo's face paled. Then again, UA failed you as well from day one, didn't we? I can say in all honesty that we failed you to the point of pushing you to have accepted to be the UA traitor since there weren't many other options left. 𝗵𝗃 said, and the detective said true. Everyone was confused about how UA failed Izuku Midoriya, but 𝗵𝗃 kept talking. I wonder, will you forgive me? 𝗵𝗃 said as a sad smile came on his face, and everyone was confused about how these questions came about, and Izuku smiled. Of course 𝗍𝗂𝗧 said, and the detective rang out true. Izuku Midoriya, do you have any last words? 𝗍𝗂 asked to allow Izuku to say what he wanted to help sell the point or say what he needs to say. Yes, I still see myself as a hero, but I know others may not. I was forced to live in a world that wanted to break me apart every single day, and sometimes we don't get to pick our future even though we want to go a completely different route. Izuku said, and the detective said it was true. 𝗍𝗂 nodded his head and looked at Izuku Midoriya with a sad expression. Izuku Midoriya, as you have admitted to agreeing to be the UA traitor, I must hand you over to the commission since they have taken an interest in this. A means of transport is already waiting for you since I had zero doubt this would be the result. 𝗍𝗂 said, and Izuku nodded his head as 𝗵𝗃 pulled Izuku by the wrists and led him out of the room as the detective was in a state of shock. 𝗍𝗂 followed behind, and they wanted this all to be done quickly since they couldn't let holes be poked into this entire mess. If the detective was able to ask real questions and not the bullshit 𝗍𝗂 and Izuku were pulling, then their entire story would get blown apart easily. As they came out of the room, everyone turned to him. All Might looked at Izuku with tears going down his face as he was trying to speak but couldn't. Izuku was silent before he bowed his head to All Might. Sorry, All Might, backs were against the wall and other options weren't available. I wonder, will you forgive me one day? Izuku said as he was dragged away with tears going down his face. They needed to get him out of the building and let the plan start moving forward as shouts started to go out asking him why. However, he was already gone as 𝗍𝗂 and 𝗵𝗃 took him outside quickly because they were in the risky early stage of the plan. Though they didn't outrun one person, which was 𝗬𝗍𝗄, who came running after them but had his students stay. As they were close to putting Izuku in the car, 𝗬𝗍𝗄 caught up to them and they all turned to him. Problem child, no Izuku. Why? If something was wrong, why didn't you come to me? I could have helped you. 𝗬𝗍𝗄 yelled out as tears went down his face as he couldn't believe his problem child, the resident sunshine child, one of his kids, had become a traitor. Izuku could see so much guilt in the man's eyes for not catching the issue before it came out like this. He felt responsible for not being able to turn one of the people who he thought had so much potential away from the path that Izuku was now on in his mind. Sorry sensei, I had no choice. Lives were on the line and they still are, but I wonder, will you still offer that hand you offer to me now in the future? Izuku asked as the cuffs stopped working and he broke them off as he grabbed 𝗍𝗂 and threw him right into 𝗬𝗍𝗄 to stop him from activating his quirk. Once that happened, he kneed 𝗵𝗃 in the stomach and jumped away quickly. They had sat the cuffs to deactivate a short period after they left the building, but 𝗬𝗍𝗄 following them wasn't a part of the plan. As such, before 𝗬𝗍𝗄 could do anything, Izuku Midoriya was already gone. What the hell happened? Yelled the detective as he came out and saw Izuku escape. Izuku Midoriya somehow escaped the cuffs. 𝗵𝗃 said as he stood up and wiped his lips from coughing up some food. DMN kid nailed me well. 𝗵𝗃 thought as he walked to check on 𝗍𝗂, who dusted himself off. Well, this isn't good. 𝗵𝗃, we need to set up a team to hunt Izuku Midoriya down. He likely will end up joining the league if my calculations are right. 𝗍𝗂 said, being careful of his words due to the detective being there. The detective says the police officers radio in that they had an escapee named Izuku Midoriya on the loose and he was to be captured if spotted. The detective gritted his teeth as he didn't want that going on since he felt as if something was off about this entire mess. 𝗍𝗂 didn't let him question Izuku Midoriya, instead the principal did it himself, which was weird since he never does it, since the detective always makes sure to ask certain questions to ensure no one is getting around his quirk. Soon they all made their way back to the dorms where they informed the class and other staff that Izuku Midoriya had escaped custody somehow by breaking the cuffs or deactivating them. It's unknown how he broke them since they deactivated out of nowhere. However, as of right now, UA will be publicly making a statement declaring Izuku Midoriya as a wanted suspect in regards to betraying the school. If you see anything of Izuku Midoriya, then you are to report it to the school at once so we can track him down. 𝗍𝗂 said, and soon he went back to his office with 𝗵𝗃. As 𝗍𝗂 and 𝗵𝗃 entered his office, they just sat there in silence for a while before 𝗵𝗃 spoke up. You know, the rush interrogation will lead to 𝗬𝗍𝗄, All Might, and the detective likely looking into the case. I know we couldn't do a really correct one since they would have had doubts if it was anyone but the detective, but still it may raise doubts regardless due to how quickly you went through it. 𝗵𝗃 said, and 𝗵𝗃 could only nod his head. In all honesty, he had some other questions he was going to ask, but having all of the students and staff present for the questions wasn't initially planned, so 𝗵𝗃 didn't want to ask the other questions, which included if Izuku ever had suicidal thoughts or anything due to his past. He wanted to hit it for a home run on the motive, but what he did should suffice for now, as he would run interference on the others looking into it, which should give them time for Izuku to join the league and find the real mole. While 𝗵𝗃 and 𝗵𝗃 sat in the office, there were others that were trying to deal with the emotions and new information they have now gained. These people were all of 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗍, Eraserhead, and the rest of the staff. Eraserhead was standing in a dorms trying to wrap his head around everything that just happened, but he was broken out of his mind when he heard sniffling in the common room area. As he looked up, he saw his other students starting to break down from the information they had learned, so he did what he could and tried to support them. As he was supporting them, Uraraka spoke up and asked her teacher and the staff a question. "Sensei," she asked, and Eraserhead and everyone turned to her as he asked what she needed in a soft tone. What did the principal mean in the questions about Deku having motives for turning on us? About how UA failed him as well? "I don't understand," she said, and everyone agreed that they were wondering the same thing as well, but that was the thing, as he didn't know what the principal meant either. "I don't know, but I will go try to find out, so can you all wait here for me to see if he will give me anything that explains this?" Eraserhead asked them all, which they nodded their heads. Even B nodded their heads as well, as they wanted answers. Even though some like Monoma was always hostile to the boys still had some respect for the green-hair student who always tried to help everyone, but now they were wondering if it was a mask. As Eraserhead left, All Might and the detective both decided to join him since they wanted answers. As such, they soon arrived outside of the principal's office. Eraserhead knocked on the door and waited to be let in. After a few seconds, the door opened slightly by none other than 𝗵𝗃, who All Might asked if they could come in. The man only opened the door wider and let them in without speaking. They entered and saw 𝗵𝗃 at his desk typing away quickly because, in truth, 𝗵𝗃 was working on Izuku's information network that he would use, which he would already have access to. 𝗵𝗃 was creating some things on there for pre-planned conversations for Izuku to use to check in with them once he reaches certain stages, like finding a place to stay safe in the next few days. "What can I help you with, because I am a bit busy preparing things regarding Izuku Midoriya?" 𝗵𝗃 said without, as he was careful with his words since the detective was in the room. It's why 𝗵𝗃 hasn't said anything yet either, since they knew the detective found the entire thing a bit fishy, since 𝗵𝗃's questions were not typical ones. Then again, nothing about framing your own student is typical. Eraserhead was the first to speak up and ask what the hell happened regarding Izuku Midoriya, which caused 𝗵𝗃 to pause for a second before typing again. "I'm assuming you're talking about his motives on why he agreed to become a UA traitor?" 𝗵𝗃 asked with a raised eyebrow, since he needed them to direct the conversation so he didn't accidentally say something in front of the detective. Even though 𝗵𝗃 was smarter than most humans, watching every single word in a situation like this was a bit of a task to accomplish with a lie detector who could call you out on the smallest lie. Eraserhead nodded his head and directly asked the question he wanted to be answered, the question that his students wanted to be answered. "Explain what you know about Izuku Midoriya past that would cause him to become a villain and how UA failed him." Eraserhead asked, as the man wanted to know if he could have prevented this. Could he have changed the path that Izuku Midoriya took before it was too late? 𝗵𝗃 nodded his head as he took a sip of tea. "Did you know Izuku Midoriya was quirkless from the age of 4 until the entrance exam for UA?" 𝗵𝗃 said calmly, as if he didn't drop a huge bomb of information on Eraserhead, who was now shocked. Eraserhead's eyes widened, but he noticed the detective and All Might knew, since they didn't have a large reaction or any reaction really to the information he had just learned. This annoyed him, since no one decided to tell him this fact until now, since he could have been training the boy better if his quirk came in that late. He also knew the numbers and information about quirkless people, and it didn't paint a good picture in his mind. Indeed, if Izuku Midoriya had anything as he thought for his life, then his problem child had a lot of reasons to go be a villain, but it still didn't make sense in his mind on how heroic the kid was when he saved people. There was something more, and the dread that he felt as he looked at his boss only increased when he heard the next set of words. Did you know 𝗵𝗃𝗃 went to the same schools as Izuku Midoriya did and grew up right next to Izuku Midoriya? Now, tell me what you know of those two. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, and Eraserhead explained that they were childhood rivals and that they always got rough with each other, but stopped when he saw 𝗵𝗃𝗃 starting right at him as things started to click into place. Izuku remembered what he knew about the life of quirkless people and the huge but pride that 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had at the start of the year, which had only recently calmed down a bit. Then it hit him right in the face as he figured it out. They aren't rivals, are they? It's an abuser and his victim, which means UA put 𝗵𝗃𝗃 in places to harm 𝗵𝗃𝗁 all of this time, and we never stopped it even when we saw it happen, since we thought that was just how they acted with each other. Eraserhead yelled as he slammed his hands on the table in front of him. All Might paled at that information that Eraserhead just said, but he was also at 𝗵𝗃𝗃, but whenever he tried to deny that 𝗵𝗃𝗃 would do it, he couldn't, as he looked back in the past on how he treated Izuku Midoriya from the start. There was also the fact that 𝗵𝗃𝗃 knew about One for All as well, which didn't sit well with All Might at all considering their relationship, but that didn't really matter since Izuku had turned to the villains, so it didn't really matter if 𝗵𝗃𝗃 knew about it at the moment. Even the detective was shocked to learn of this information, as everything that was coming out of 𝗵𝗃𝗃's mouth came out as true with his quirk. How the hell did a school get away with all of that, since the statistics are not good, which meant it had to appear in the school as well, the detective thought as he made some notes about this entire situation, since he was involved with the League of Villains case, as there was a high chance Izuku Midoriya joining them. Anyway, moving forward. UA failed Izuku Midoriya on many accounts, so he had many reasons to become a villain. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said, and Gran Torino just rolled his eyes at 𝗵𝗃𝗃, who was dragging this on. We allowed his abuser to be right next to him. We glossed over the attempted murder thing during the battle training that All Might did. We paired them up for the final exams and so many other situations as well. Izuku Midoriya had many reasons on why he would become a villain. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 explained as he set his teacup down, but sadly for 𝗵𝗃𝗃, on wanting to stay with the current plan, Eraserhead wasn't going to stop, as he had so many emotions going on in him right now. One of them was tied to the fact that he knew he could have done something for Izuku Midoriya but failed to realize he read the entire situation wrong, which played into this entire thing from the current understanding, but something bugs him still. Eraserhead shook his head and said no. No, something still doesn't add up about this entire situation. He was still far too heroic and good in nature. I still refuse to believe he would turn on us. Eraserhead said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 sighed as he shrugged. I don't know what you expect me to do, as he is now wanted and he admitted to being a traitor to UA, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said as he knew the conversation was getting into dangerous waters on getting close to the truth. Eraserhead still shook his head and asked to be put on the team to hunt down Izuku Midoriya and the entire case. He's my student, I am responsible for him, so I want to track him down and bring him in. Put me on the case. Eraserhead said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 turned to Gran Torino, who shrugged. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said he would have him added to the case, and the detective said he would be joining it, well, which 𝗵𝗃𝗃 knew the detective would join since Izuku held One for All and the detective knew the truth of the quirk. Soon Eraserhead walked out of the room since he was so caught up in his emotions and mind, while the detective followed after the man since he knew Eraserhead would be informing the class. The detective wanted to see if anyone noticed anything, and he would also be going through Midoriya's room as well to look for clues. However, All Might stayed in the room as he stood there in silence. Gran Torino spoke up and asked how he was holding in regards to finding out, and it was then that All Might spoke and asked why wasn't he informed until now of them believing Izuku Midoriya to be a mole. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was silent for a bit but chose to go with the point that All Might wouldn't have believed it, which All Might said he still didn't. He said backs were against the wall and other options weren't available. I believe he was forced into this and didn't have an option. Why wasn't that looked into before you questioned him? All Might said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 said there was nothing that indicated that beforehand in what they had found. All Might still didn't like all of this but kept silent as he walked out of the room. After a few moments, Gran Torino spoke up, you know they are going to dig into this, right? I am doubting All Might believes the bullshit we are pulling fully, so he will start digging, which is going to risk Izuku's life. Gran Torino said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was silent for a while but sighed. I know, but he needed a real reaction to this in the event of the mole being anyone from A or B. If they get really close to the truth, then we might need to consider bringing them in, but for now, we need real reactions out of them, or else Izuku's done all of this for nothing if the league doesn't believe him, having turned his back on UA. We will be framing it in the media that he is suspected of having a hand in the USJ and the summer camp, which should bring interest by the league. 𝗍𝗂 said, and 𝗵𝗃 nodded his head as he sat in the office. As we swch back to Eraserhead, we can find him entering the dorms of where everyone turned their attention to him. Everyone was still in denial, but Eraserhead could see 𝗵𝘃𝗀 having a different reaction with some denial mixed in. They all looked at him and prayed he would say it was all a joke, but he sighed. 𝗍𝗍 has given me information on the possible motives of Izuku Midoriya doing all of this, and let's say it's compelling. As it turns out, Izuku Midoriya is a late bloomer, which means he was quirkless from the age of 4 to roughly the entrance exam, which the life of a quirkless person is highly unhealthy and filled with pain, suffering, abuse, and many other things which could have filled him to do this. I also found out how UA failed him, but at this time I can't disclose those reasons, but UA most likely helped him go down this route. Aizawa said, and everyone's faces fell into mixed emotions of learning this. As of now, Izuku Midoriya has been classified as a villain and will be hunted down. If you come across him in your work studies, I want you to retreat if you can and get your work studies supervisors to fight him instead. You need to remember he's been with you all and knows your weakness and strengths. As such, he is a high threat to all of you. Myself and 𝗵𝗃𝗀 have been assigned to the case to hunt him down and are in charge of it. He was my student and is my responsibility to bring to an end, dead or alive. Eraserhead said as a tear went down his face. Everyone was in shock at what they heard, and 𝗵𝘃𝗀 just ran out of the dorms and you could hear him scream outside. Eraserhead went outside and found 𝗵𝘃𝗀 breaking down on the sidewalk in front of the dorms. He's blaming himself for it due to what he has done, which with what I know most likely did push Izuku Midoriya to this path, but we had our hands in it as well. Eraserhead thought. I know why you are being hit harder than everyone else. We found out about Izuku Midoriya's past of being quirkless and you attended school with him. I don't know all of the details as 𝗍𝗂 didn't give me it all, but I think it's quite clear that you have done quite a lot towards him, haven't you? Eraserhead said and asked, but 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was silent. Eraserhead spoke up once again, about what you did. You aren't being expelled, but there will be punishment moving forward. However, you have a long path in front of you to ever make up for what you did, and you will be telling me everything you did. When we find him, I suggest you apologize to him and maybe we can just save him from the path he is on before he goes too far. Eraserhead said, and 𝗵𝘃𝗀 nodded his head as he sat there. Eraserhead refused to believe his problem child couldn't be saved as the emotions in Izuku's voice when he asked Aizawa if he would still be offered a helping hand before he fled bugged the man. Aizawa believed something larger was going on and that Izuku didn't have full control of his situation, so he wasn't going to drop it and he was going to find out what was going on, because as his emotions cleared he realized the questions 𝗍𝗂 asked were fishy for 1 and 2, he realized his boss hardly ever joins in the questions for anyone. As such, it didn't sit well for him and he was going to find out what the hell was going on. Soon they went back inside as 𝗵𝘃𝗀 sat down with everyone and they all just started to work their emotions out as the Deku squad took the hit really strong from what Eraserhead could see. Izuku Midoriya had a role in everyone's lives and it was a large one. Without him, the class seemed empty to everyone, even Aizawa felt the gap in the class. DMN problem child, I will bring you in no matter what and find the truth out. Aizawa thought as he hoped this would come to an end as soon as possible. Aizawa just helped his students however he could, since each of them was taking it in different ways. Some were silent, some were crying, some were just void of emotions as if they still couldn't grasp what happened. Izuku had broken out of his cuffs in a quick movement, and as he did this he grabbed 𝗍𝗂, which resulted in the principal being tossed into Eraserhead to prevent OFA from being taken from him. As Eraserhead was now blocked for a short moment from using his quirk, Izuku quickly needed 𝗵𝗃𝗀 as he had one for all to help him quickly do things. Izuku's knee went right at the stomach of 𝗵𝗃𝗀, which knocked him down to his knees. With that done, due to them being the main threats to him escaping in this plan, Izuku activated his quirk once more and bolted. This was the start of the plan, and he decided to go from UA and towards his home to help cover up the fact that he needs to get to the secure laptop for his work. The drop-off location was near his home since he couldn't really go anywhere else without raising flags on why he had a place hidden away from his home. After a short trip with his quirk on 𝗵𝘃𝗃, he arrived at the secure drop location where he found the laptop and some money. There was also a note as well that told him to be safe, which made him smile a bit. "Goodbye 𝗬𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗲, forgive me, my friends," Izuku thought as he secured the backpack around his back and was ready to leave when he saw her in the distance was one Izuku Midoriya, who was far away from him but looking straight at him with an expression of shock and sadness. Izuku put his head down slightly and then looked back up with a smile on his face that was clearly a sad one and conveyed his thoughts to her. "Goodbye, mother," Izuku thought as he turned his quirk on again and bolted away from the site as he needed to escape, as he decided to head towards the prefectures around Tokyo to hide in all of the cities. It would be a good place to hide out in, as well as a way to lose anyone that would have tracked him down. About half an hour into his journey with his quirk on, he arrived outside a store in the outskirts of one of the major city areas that were in the prefectures around the Tokyo prefecture. The reason he headed towards this direction was that he had no clear idea, nor did the police, on where the League was currently based. Also, with One for All, Izuku could travel across Japan quite easily at a fast speed since he was slightly faster than the trains going at full speed. There was the side fact that he needed to avoid cameras as well so that he couldn't be tracked down by random people that were after him for his fake crimes. As Izuku took a quick break to get his breath steady and calm down since he was running non-stop, he saw a TV report which didn't shock him one bit about what it was about. On the TV was a news report that there were rumors that a student had been a mole in UA. At this time, we are receiving a press release from UA that states the following: "The former UA student Izuku Midoriya is hereby wanted for the crimes of betraying UA and conspiring with villains. It is believed that he may have assisted the villains in the attacks on the USJ and the attack on the summer camp which allowed them to get to the UA students," said the short press release from UA. At this time, if you see Izuku Midoriya, the former provisional pro-hero Deku, then you are to report it to a nearby authority or call the police line at XXXXXXXXX. Do not attempt to come close to this individual since they are dangerous, said the TV news report, which Izuku stayed to watch so he knew what was reported about him. After a few more minutes, Izuku headed off to go deeper into the cities as he needed to start finding himself a home to hide out at as well as make connections in the underground world. Thankfully, I was given information on where a lot of villains meet up in this part of Japan, Izuku thought as he made sure to study all of the information he could for this entire mission. Izuku headed deep into the heart of all of the villain lairs in the surrounding Tokyo cities and got to work. Goodbye hero world and hello villain world, as accused is here, Izuku thought as he put a determined face on and had a small smile on his face. Izuku soon found himself in a dark alley as he made his way past fights that were going on between criminals. Though one guy did want to start trouble with Izuku, but sadly for that man Izuku wasn't in the mood. As the man tried to mug Izuku, he found himself thrown into the wall with his knife stabbed into his shoulder. I suggest you F off and leave with only the knife in your shoulder as you're only wound. Do you understand? Izuku said in a tone of voice that expressed that he wasn't to be F with. After the man ran away, Izuku soon found himself in a bar filled with people yelling and causing issues, though it didn't matter to Izuku as he went to the far back and opened his laptop up. As the hours passed, Izuku spent his time getting his analysis out in the deep web of different villains, since he didn't want to target heroes right away and draw too much attention, as he wanted to slowly build up his network of information and not seem like he wanted to join the League right away, or else they would seem fishy of him. All in all, it would be ideal if they came to me instead of me going to them, Izuku thought, but unknown to him there were already eyes on him, since quite a few people in that bar were some villains that used to belong to the 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃 but were lucky not to be at the main compound on the day of the raid. These villains wanted to get at Izuku Midoriya, who screwed their lives up. As such, they were waiting for a perfect chance to attack him. With a bit more work done in getting his initial network on the deep web going with the help of Nizu having already made some requests on the network, Izuku closed his laptop and saw that it was starting to get really dark out. So it's closing in on being the end of the first day, Izuku thought as he looked at the clock and saw it was p.m. Izuku was a bit shocked at the amount of time he spent on his laptop in the bar, but it worked for him since he was able to do a decent job on setting up his network. Izuku's network was called the Golden Leaf, which allowed people to request information from him or talk to other people. Overall, it was a simple coded network, but it relied on bouncing off other networks and devices so that it couldn't be traced back to him easily. As Izuku packed his things up, he knew he would need to find a place to stay for the night, and there was quite a handful of abandoned buildings in the area he was at, so one of them would become his temporary spot before he moved on to another location to start making a name for himself in hopes of attracting the League's attention to him. Though as Izuku walked out of the bar, he noticed several people get up from their bar tables a bit after him. At first, he didn't make much of it until he noticed they were following him from behind. Are they underground heroes or villains? Izuku thought to himself, but soon concluded it was villains since they were bad at staying hidden. Izuku led them into an alleyway that was a bit ahead of him, which he knew from walking into this area that it was an open-ended alleyway, so he would have an escape route. The villains followed him into it and he turned around. "So why are you gentlemen following me?" Izuku asked them, and they chuckled a bit. "Brat, you don't have your heroes to back you up anymore. We are former members of the 𝗧𝗵𝗃 and we are going to get you for your part in destroying our old boss," said one man, and at the name of the organization they used to be a part of, Izuku felt all restraint in his body leave at that moment. Izuku had planned to hold back a bit since he didn't want to really harm people, but for this group of people, he didn't feel the need to hold back since they believed it was okay to experiment on little children. "Oh, you are a part of 𝗲𝗄𝗏's old group. I didn't think any of you escaped, but no matter. I don't mind finishing the job upon you all," Izuku said in a tone of voice that sounded completely done with them, as the rage he had for 𝗲𝗏 was the only thing in his mind since he could only think of how much pain Eri went through. The fact that he had to leave her made him even more. "Help me out, Black," Izuku thought as the black came out of his body and responded to his anger he was feeling. The thing though, they weren't out of control. No, Izuku had full control of them since his emotions were under control and aimed only at the men in front of him. The black shot out from Izuku and grabbed each individual as Izuku raised them into the air and slammed them to the ground a few times, which earned some cracks of their arms or legs. Izuku then searched for something to tie them up with and found nothing really good except some iron poles in the dumpster. "Can't get what you need, then you must use what you can get," Izuku said as he turned his quirk on a bit and just bent the poles around them as he secured them to a street pole on the main street where he knew a police car would come sooner or later. "Hopefully someone from the dark alleys doesn't come out and finish you all off. I want you to rot in jail for the things you helped with," Izuku said to them as they pleaded with him to let them go, but Izuku just ignored them. Soon he made his way to the dark parts of the city again and found an abandoned building which he broke into an apartment to sleep in. This was how Izuku's first night on the run came to an end, but there were quite a lot of reactions from others about what has happened to Izuku Midoriya. One reaction was from the leader of the League of Villains, Shigaraki, who was looking at the TV in the house they were currently hiding out in. "Oh, he's been accused of crimes he didn't even commit since he wasn't how we got into the USJ or the summer camp. Interesting, Mr. Compress, call Grain and tell him to find Izuku Midoriya for me. I want to talk to the kid. We might just have a powerful new recruit," Shigaraki said with a twisted smile on his face as he remembered how much Izuku Midoriya had screwed him up in the past. Thinking about the strength that Izuku had made him want to bring Izuku Midoriya to his side if the news report had any truth to it, since it would have destroyed the faith that Izuku had in the Hero Society. Mr. Compress nodded his head and started to make his phone call. The next day arrived at the news of what one Izuku Midoriya was accused of, and everyone was impacted greatly by the news. Even those in other classes outside of A were impacted, as even B expect Momona, who was in, but to everyone was a bit down at what they learned about the green-hair sunshine kid from 𝗵𝗃. Over in the third-year dorms where Mirio sat with his classmates, they were talking about the news they saw on the news channel and had gotten it confirmed by their teacher, which devastated them. Mirio was trying to come to grasps with what he learned as he had done a work study with Izuku at 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗁's agency, and no matter how he looked at it he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Mirio got up and walked out of the third-year dorms as he went to find All Might. Mirio needed more information. He needed to find out what truly drove Izuku Midoriya to this, because he couldn't believe this is the actions of the same person he did a work study with. As Mirio walked to the staff dorms he asked where All Might was at, and the staff said he was out walking on one of the paths across campus, so Mirio went out searching for him. After about minutes of looking for All Might, he found him standing near one of the small ponds on the campus that the path went by. All Might noticed Mirio but didn't say anything as Mirio came up to him and they both stood there in silence. "Sir, do you have any information on why Deku did this? It doesn't add up to the individual I knew during my work study. It doesn't add up to the person that went beyond everything to help save Eri." Mirio finally asked as he turned to look at All Might, who was looking at the rising sun in the morning. After a few moments of silence, All Might explained everything he was told about Izuku Midoriya's past in full without hiding anything except the truth of the quirk. Mirio was stunned, but it still didn't feel right to him. "It still seems off," Mirio said, and All Might raised an eyebrow and asked him to explain. Everything he has done has been to try and change things. To be a hero, to change society from what I can gather in his action, so why would he throw it away now? It doesn't make sense unless he was being forced into this. You said during the investigation he said that there weren't any other options. I think he may have been forced or threatened into the position he was, so that is why he would agree to it if someone was in danger if he didn't. "Sir, we have to explore the options of him having been forced to go down this path against his will," Mirio said, and All Might nodded his head as he confirmed that he held the same feelings about Izuku Midoriya most likely being forced by others to go down this route. "I believe Eraserhead and the detective have the same views as us and will be looking into it. I will ask them if you can join us to look into it," All Might said, since he knew Mirio would want to join in on the unofficial case, since they couldn't officially open a case unless they find proof that he may have been threatened or forced into the position Izuku was in now. Unknown to them all, 𝗍𝗍 was watching this entire conversation go down via a security drone that he had monitoring All Might. "Well, they worked a bit faster than I would have liked. Got to keep them off Izuku's trail for a while," 𝗍𝗍 thought as he texted Gran Torino what All Might talked about with Mirio. Gran Torino had already set off to keep appearances of him tracking down Izuku Midoriya, since there had been a sighting of him somewhere near Tokyo after he fought several former 𝗳𝗏 Sasuke members that somehow had escaped the raid. 𝗍𝗍 was surprised to find a description of Izuku so quickly, but understood why he did when he found out what organization the men had belonged to. "Even acting as you are still heroic, Izuku," 𝗍𝗍 thought as he got to work on some things. While all of this was going on, one Katsuki Bakugo was in the gym training as strong as he could, even though his friends tried to get him to stop. However, he wouldn't stop no matter what they tried to do, as even 𝗓𝗄𝗵𝗲 hardened himself and tried to grab Bakugo, but the boy just slammed into his friend and forced him away. They were confused about why Bakugo was acting the way he was, since they thought he disliked Midoriya. They knew they were childhood friends, but they only knew that and how hostile their relationship had been until recently. Though Eraserhead came into the gym since he got notified of his students being in the gym, and he was concerned about them driving themselves into the ground as an outlet, which he was right, but at least for Bakugo. As Eraserhead stood there, he sighed and turned his quirk on Bakugo, who froze. "Give it back," Bakugo muttered out, and Eraserhead told him no, since it wasn't healthy on what he was doing. "I need to get stronger, I need to stop him. It's my fault," Bakugo yelled out as a tear went down his face, as you could see he had dark bags under his eyes. It was clear he didn't sleep at all last night, and his friends were confused on why Izuku Midoriya turning would be his fault. "This is due to your guilt for what you did. I hold some of the blame since I read everything wrong between you two. I thought it was a strong rivalry, but I was wrong. A lot of people hold blame for the path that Problem Child went down. You hold a lot more, but you're not the sole person to be blamed for it, so you need to rest, since I know you've been in here since early this morning, meaning you never really slept." Eraserhead said, confusing the Baku squad on what the hell he was talking about, on how Izuku Midoriya turning was Bakugo's fault in some way. If I was just less of a PP, he might have not chosen this route. If I could have at least grown the courage to apologize for everything I did to him, then maybe he would still be here. He's always been following me around, but now, Bakugo said as he cut himself off, and Eraserhead knew a portion of the problem for his student. Izuku Midoriya had always been a constant factor in Katsuki Bakugo's life. No matter how strong Bakugo had tried to push Izuku Midoriya away, he never went away until now. As such, Bakugo didn't know how to deal with the loss of a constant in his life. Eraserhead was sure that deep down under all of the emotions that Bakugo had was some form of respect and longing for friendship with Izuku Midoriya, but now it was likely too late. But now he's gone. That is what we need to deal with now, as he will be hunted down and brought to justice, but this also means you need to face what you have done. Go take a break and come to my office later, as I think it's time you tell me every single detail of your crimes. Understood. Eraserhead said, and Bakugo nodded his head as he sat down on the floor and his friends checked on him. Eraserhead waited a bit longer and made eye contact with 𝗵𝗃𝗄, who looked confused and concerned, but Eraserhead said nothing as he walked away. Bakugo sat there in silence for a while before 𝗵𝗃𝗄 decided to ask what their teacher and Bakugo were talking about, though Bakugo still stayed silent for a while longer. I was a bully, I was Izuku's bully. Bakugo said as he got up and walked away, leaving them in shock at what they just heard. Bakugo, instead of taking a break, just went straight to his teacher's office to let the man know the truth of everything, since the man needed to know what happened and Bakugo needed to talk to someone about it. As this happened, those in A were still coming to terms with everything, as well as the Deku squad, or what was left of them now, were all sitting in the common rooms talking to each other. Todoroki was looking at his hands and felt mixed emotions on Izuku Midoriya, as he was Todoroki's first friend in reality, and now that said individual was gone. The same individual who helped him use his fire side and overcome his issues. Uraraka was devastated and confused, as the person she had become close to was now gone. The same person that saved her in the entrance exam from getting crushed by a robot, so she was wondering if what he did was an act now, and she couldn't figure it out. Now, Tenya Ida was wondering, similar to his friend Uraraka but more in depth, on if Izuku had a hand in providing information about heroes such as his brother or others to villains. Ida was trying to deny everything in his mind due to his interactions with Izuku Midoriya, but he didn't know what to do and felt so disgusted with himself for not seeing that his friend was either in trouble or needed help, since he believed they could have turned their friend from the path he walked on. Ida couldn't bring himself to hate Izuku Midoriya even if he truly was a villain, because of how much Izuku had helped them all, since he didn't believe any of that was faked. Though there was some like Mineta who was denouncing Izuku Midoriya for being a villain and saying that he needed to be locked up quickly. This didn't go over well with really anyone, as a lot of them glared at him until someone finally spoke up. This individual was none other than Tsu, who told Mineta to shut it. Shut up, Mineta. Do remember, you and me would be dead if he didn't save us at the USJ, with his plans and actions. I refuse to believe he purposefully intended to become a villain but was left with no choice due to life, unlike you who actively decides to be a pervert and sexually harass us, females. Tsu said, shutting Mineta up as she had slapped him with her tongue. Mineta walked out of the room in silence, and everyone was left back to their individual thoughts after that incident. Some like Satu and Kuda were making sweets and food for everyone to help them relax, as neither were very close to Izuku but still felt affected on his departure from the class. All they could do right now was sit in silence with their thoughts. Though there were others affected, such as Izuku Midoriya, who was sitting in her friend's home, the Bakugos. Izuku went to their home since they didn't want her to be harassed by reporters, and they were also the only friends that Izuku currently had, so they wanted to make sure she was supported. Izuku was in tears, not because of her son becoming a villain, but because she knew there was a high risk of him dying and she hated it but couldn't only hope he would make it back. Though even Kota from the Wild Pussycat heard of the news, he refused to believe it due to the actions that Izuku had done at the summer camp. Everyone was in complete denial of Izuku Midoriya becoming a villain, but there was nothing they could currently do about it. It was the mid-afternoon of the next day when Izuku truly started to get to work on things in an attempt to start making a name for himself, as he needed a way to draw the attention of villains and, more importantly, the league itself to him. As such, Izuku headed out as it started to get a bit darker to acquire what he would need to start himself out with and start laying connections around with local villains across the Tokyo area and surrounding cities. One thing for sure was that he needed to change out of his hero outfit since it stuck out like a sore thumb. As Izuku moved across the rooftops, he heard a scream and decided to look into it and discovered a lady was being held down by some thugs who seemed to be getting ready to RPE her. I can't keep saving people since it wouldn't make sense for a villain, though if I hide the true reasons why I do it for other things then I can easily make excuses. Izuku thought as he jumped down. Everyone came to a stop thinking a hero had arrived, but then the villains grinned when they saw it was the recent hero to villain Izuku Midoriya. Hey brat, I recognize you from the news. Want to join us with her? One man asked, and Izuku looked at the woman who looked like she was asking for help. Izuku silently walked up towards them without saying yes or no, which made the criminals think he was going to join them when suddenly Izuku punched the man guy out. There are many things in this world that happen, but raping a woman is pathetic even for us villains. It shows you are powerless and lack any guiding principles except to seek just harm to others. I am not like that. As I seek change due to the life I lived, though, I will gladly take your clothing, Izuku said with a smile on his face that really didn't belong with the situation they were all in. Izuku quickly dispatched all of the other low-level criminals without any issue. The lady seemed shocked and confused about what just happened, but she just watched Izuku take the clothing from the other man and change outfits right in front of her. Izuku quickly changed without wasting time, since the screams from the lady would most likely have earned a call to the police from anyone that might have been around. As Izuku finished, he took out his notebook from his bag and discarded his hero outfit, though he did keep some of the things that helped brace his arms and legs, like his reinforced boots for combat, as he didn't want to destroy his arms even more. Overall, Izuku looked quite scary with his new outfit and facial expression he was sporting. Interesting that I lucked out on a man wearing some green, Izuku muttered as he wrote a note in the book, which he tore out and gave to the lady with his old hero outfit. Interesting that I lucked out on a man wearing some green, Izuku muttered as he wrote a note in the book, which he tore out and gave to the lady with his old hero outfit. Don't worry, I won't harm you. I may be a villain, but I have things that even I won't condone. RPE is one of them. If you would be helpful, then can you have this note and outfit delivered to Detective 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗧, as I am sure he got assigned to my case, or to Principal Nizu of UA. Tell them, the accused one says hello and that I have many things to do before I can be caught, Izuku said, and asked the woman, who was still scared but nodded her head as Izuku could hear sirens coming in the distance. Izuku just jumped away and used the float quirk to get to the roof easier, where he just quickly gained distance away from the crime scene. After a few minutes, the police arrived, but Izuku was long gone. Instead, he was now miles away, moving through alleyways as he was searching for the place he was needing. The place was another location that had large gatherings of villains sometimes, but Izuku also knew info brokers gathered in this area. That was the sole reason heroes, or rather underground heroes, didn't break into the place Izuku was going, since it was somewhat of a natural area. It was an underground fighting ring that was technically legal. The only illegal thing that was going on would be the criminal individuals that visited the place to make deals, but the place had strict no drags or contraband policy that allowed them to keep operating, since it didn't give police or heroes legal reason to arrest people there. As such, people met there to swap information or to agree to trades that would happen at other places. Otherwise, people fought in the ring and placed bets which were percent legal in the eyes of the law, as long as both sides were truly percent willing to do it. It was Antware thing that the business had a strict policy on to ensure they didn't get shut down or targeted. They made sure everyone going in wasn't under a quirk and could legally agree to waive all rights on they knew what they were doing. As Izuku arrived at the place, where he knocked on the door and a small hole opened so the person on the other side could see outside. The man asked for a password and Izuku shrugged. Sorry fella, I am new on the scene since I just escaped custody yesterday. You may have seen me on the news lately as well, Izuku said, trying to gain entrance since he knew he would have some trouble, since the password is given out changed each month and current core members of the business had to provide it to others. The man looked Izuku over and his eyes widened slightly, and the man was silent for a while before telling Izuku to wait outside as he would check to see if anyone was willing to entrain him as a guest for the night, to see if he would be accepted moving forward. That was indeed one way to get inside. If a current member that was in high standing with the business was willing to allow him entrance on one-time biases, then Izuku would need to prove his worth, for example in the ring, to show that he means business and was willing to commit to being a member. Otherwise, he would need to get the password from someone that was willing to tell him. It was more or less that you put up or shut up, because strength in the underground world ruled. After waiting for a bit, which was in reality about minutes, the door opened and Izuku looked to see if he was going to be allowed to enter. A man came out and Izuku was downright shocked to see who the hell it was. It was none other than one of the best information brokers for the villain underworld, Jiren. There were suspicions that the League of Villains had used this man to recruit villains and random criminals into the organization before, but they didn't know if he was still helping the League out with the loss of All for One. A man came out and Izuku was downright shocked to see who the hell it was. It was none other than one of the best information brokers for the villain underworld, 𝗳𝗏. There were suspicions that the League of Villains had used this man to recruit 𝗲𝗏. Hello Izuku Midoriya. I wonder if you know who I am. 𝗳𝗏 asked and Izuku slowly nodded his head but kept his guard up since he did not plan to meet this man so soon. Indeed, I do know who you are 𝗳𝗏. Though that isn't surprising since you are one of the top information brokers that had even helped 𝗳𝗏. Izuku said and 𝗳𝗏 nodded his head. Both of them looked at each other in the eyes as Izuku also planned to escape if need be since he didn't know how likely this man wasn't going to just try to get him killed since he hasn't really made a name for himself as a villain, which means his credibility of not still being a hero was still low and breakable. How about you come inside? I think I will be willing to host you for the night. Let's see what you are made of now that you are no longer a hero. 𝗳𝗏 said and Izuku felt a chill go down his spine as he nodded his head and kept a calm appearance on his face as he followed 𝗳𝗏 and the guard for the door down a flight of steps. After what felt like minutes they arrived in a larger room that had a lot of people in it that were shouting, but there were also others away from the middle of the room against the wall talking to each other. Izuku glanced down into the hole to see why everyone was shouting and he saw two people fighting it out inside the pit. Though, Izuku did also notice all of the BLD on the walls and ring area as well. So I take it from your words you want me to fight in the ring? Izuku asked 𝗳𝗏 without changing his expression as he watched one opponent break the other side's leg. So I take it from your words you want me to fight in the ring? Izuku asked 𝗳𝗏 without changing his expression as he watched one opponent break the other side's leg. Izuku knew there was a no-killing rule since that was a surefire way to get the place closed down if bodies were being taken out of the place. Broken bones were easily healed by some staff they had on hand or with time. 𝗳𝗏 nodded his head as he stepped next to Izuku and spoke up, indeed, after that, I think I have an offer for you depending on your results. So you will want to do good in your fights as you will keep going until I say otherwise. 𝗳𝗏 said and Izuku knew this was a test for him. Not to stay in the club but for whatever offer, and 𝗳𝗏 wanted to see how committed Izuku was because if Izuku held back then it meant he was wavering. Izuku agreed to the fight and then he was taken by another individual down to a waiting room where he was given some spare shorts to change into that were fresh out of a package since Izuku was wearing nicer clothing. The guy said it was standard for them to do this so the fighters could change back into their normal clothing when they needed to leave. It raised fewer questions when people are seen leaving the building since this was barely legal. Izuku also had to sign a waiver saying he knew what he was getting into and the business had zero responsibility for his heel but would provide some care before letting him leave. Of course, Izuku signed it right away and had gotten changed into his outfit as his other clothing was put into a bag that was left in the room. Izuku could hear the shouting calm down as an announcer spoke, "Ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we have a special fighter who joins us for the first time. You all might recognize them as the new villain known as Izuku Midoriya who betrayed 𝗬𝗍, said the announcer as Izuku walked out as promoted by the guide. Izuku could feel everyone looking at him when everyone broke out into shouts and some cheers. The announcer then went on to announce a normal fighter of the ring who was a rising star in the ring at the place who was currently undefeated. The man was known as Wolf as he could bulk up to an appearance similar to a wolf. Quirks were also allowed in the ring as long as they didn't destroy the ring itself or harm the people watching. Izuku stood across from the man who had already bulked up to his wolf form and Izuku just stood there without turning one for all on yet. The announcer called the fight to a start and Izuku just watched the person charge at him as Izuku took a fighting position and waited until nearly the last moment as he twisted his body as he quickly turned OFA on and rotated around the arm with the float quirk and OFA at %. Izuku then grabbed the man's arm and snapped it right away without holding back. Sorry, but I have people I want to protect. I can't lose the possible connection to the league right out of the gate. Izuku thought in his mind as he quickly got off the person and swiped the feet from his opponent out from under them. As Wolf went down to his knees, Izuku grabbed his neck and pulled back on it as he grabbed the other hand as well and put Wolf into a chokehold. The announcer called the match as Izuku let go and Wolf fell to the ground as he was breathing strong since Wolf had tapped out. Everyone was in stunned silence as Izuku had just won his match within minutes, which the average match took minutes depending on the opponents due to them trying to defeat each other, but Izuku didn't give Wolf any chances and had analyzed him within seconds, as he could tell by the stance that his opponent had taken how the first attack would play out. Some men came out and dragged Wolf away as the next match was called to start. Ladies and gents, I've been informed that Izuku Midoriya will continue to fight non-stop until the person that is hosting him for the night allows him to stop. As such, we are now going for what appears to be a fight to the top of the ranks depending on how long he lasts. Yelled the announced, and Izuku rolled his shoulders as he got back into his starting position. Here we go, Izuku thought, as he knew he needed to conserve energy when and where he could, since he didn't know how long this would last. Izuku was right in that decision, as he was fighting for nearly an hour and a half, as he had fought over different opponents, with some taking longer and others being shorter matches. From what Izuku could gather from the announcer, he had defeated the individual that was ranked in th place of their fighting ring, since they only keep track of the top 50 fighters with all of the people that go through doors. To score a rank you needed to defeat someone that already had a rank to get on the ranking list, which Izuku had done several times now, as he had several ranked individuals in his opponents tonight. As the next match was about to be announced, 𝗳𝗏 put a stop to the fighting, as he had seen enough and had the announcer alert Izuku that he was done and could step out of the ring. Izuku surely had completed what he had set out to do that night, as he had created an initial name for himself, as he had the announcer start to call the villain name he had started to use, so people were shouting out 𝗳𝗏𝗃 on repeat. Izuku changed out of his fighting outfit and was to a new area of the business where 𝗳𝗏 was waiting for him. Before Izuku could even say or ask anything, another individual walked up and dropped off quite a bit of money. Izuku raised an eyebrow and 𝗳𝗏 laughed a bit as he explained he better on Izuku to earn himself some money, since he knew Izuku was strong already, but was shocked how quickly he made it through so many matches, which earned him quite a bit of money since he had placed bets and was the host for him for the night. 𝗳𝗏 then took some of the money and handed it to Izuku, as he explained that each fighter gets a percentage of the bets placed if they win if they were a normal member without being hosted, but 𝗳𝗏 still thought Izuku deserved some of it since he made him a lot of money in one night. Accepting the money, Izuku just placed it inside of the bag that he had with him and looked at 𝗳𝗏 as he asked about what the offer 𝗳𝗏 wanted to make to him. 𝗳𝗏 nodded his head slowly and spoke after a few seconds of looking at Izuku. As you know, I've helped the league recruit quite a few of their newer members that would be called the Vanguard Action Squad. Shigaraki had put in a request for you to be found and brought to him, 𝗳𝗏 said, and Izuku went on guard right away, since this could go either way. 1. Shigaraki wanted to recruit Izuku, or Shigaraki wanted to finish the job and dust Izuku for good. Oh. I take it he wants to finally get rid of me since I happened to annoy him when I was still at UA. Izuku said, and he made his defensive posture visible enough for 𝗳𝗏 to notice it, so he didn't seem eager at the fact that Shigaraki wanted to speak to him. Calm down, he isn't wanting to dust you from what I've been told. He wants to offer you a place, a new home with the league. Even though he indeed has been at you for all the SHT you have done, he still wants to talk to you about joining the league. 𝗳𝗏 said, and Izuku still kept his guard up but lightly relaxed visibly for 𝗳𝗏 to see it. Oh. Even after all the times I interfered with his plans. Did he mature as of late? Izuku asked, and 𝗳𝗏 laughed at that and nodded his head. Indeed, without all for one, Shigaraki had greatly matured more in his attitude. There's still some childish in him, but he is getting far better in his actions and leading. 𝗳𝗏 said, and Izuku pretended to think it over. Why would I join the league when it would more or less confirm what UA is reporting on me being responsible for the league getting into the USJ and the summer camp when I never did those things? I only analyzed people and quirks, which has been used to pin me as helping the league and others. Izuku said, and 𝗳𝗏 raised an eyebrow and asked if he had some of his analysis for him to see, which Izuku pulled out one notebook and showed it. This notebook was on random villains and some heroes he suspected of being dirty, so he wouldn't feel completely horrible if they somehow got attacked due to his notes. 𝗳𝗏 was astonished at the level of details in the notes and asked if Izuku was currently selling and providing this information to others. Izuku nodded his head and explained he had a network currently set up where he takes requests from for his work. 𝗳𝗏 asked for the name and Izuku provided it, as 𝗳𝗏 said he would likely submit some requests. Though 𝗳𝗏 did move back to the original topic at hand and explain that Izuku didn't have many other options outside of the League unless he joined some random villain groups or worked alone. Think about it, the League already has the public attention, and if you join them then the heroes and government will be less likely to directly target you since they would need to deal with the overall League as well. The League also still has the 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏 even without All for One as well, so they still have powerful resources as well. It would provide you a home that you don't need to be moving out of every few days to keep off the police radar, and you could also have people you already somewhat know as well. 𝗳𝗏 said, and Izuku moving his head about as he was thinking and sighed. Fine, I will be willing to meet Shigaraki to see if he won't try to dust me. Where would I meet them at? Izuku asked 𝗳𝗏, who smiled greatly and said he would take Izuku to a place to meet them right away, as he would call them. 𝗳𝗏 did say it would be a trip to get there, but it wouldn't be completely long, which Izuku nodded his head at. As such, Izuku grabbed all of his belongings and they headed to the current house that Izuku had broken into to grab his other bag, which contained some food that he had stolen from some other villains. After that, they left and started their trip in a car that 𝗳𝗏 had, so they wouldn't need to take public transportation. Overall, Izuku was quite surprised at how soon he was going to be making contact with the League, but it still worked for him. It seems that the media coverage did indeed gain the League's interest in me. Might get the first stages of this entire mission completed faster than expected, Izuku thought as he rested his head against the window in the car 𝗳𝗏 was driving. After about an hour's drive north of Tokyo, they arrived in the city of Tsuchiura, which was located in the Ibaraki prefecture. So this is where the League's located at, or is near, since they would go too far away from their base due to risks of being caught from being out in the open. Izuku thought to himself as he got out of the car as 𝗳𝗏 did. The man leads Izuku down a few alleyways and towards an abandoned warehouse. Izuku just kept his guard up the entire time in the event Shigaraki truly did want to dust Izuku, because if he did then this would be a chance to capture Shigaraki and bring the League to an end if possible. Though it would be better to get involved with the League and figure out how they get information on UA and do the attacks they have done in the past. As they entered the warehouse, Izuku could see Shigaraki standing in the middle of the room with the League members around in different areas. Izuku was able to make visual contact on each of them, but knew that didn't mean SHT with twice in the room, since they could all be clones to start off with. Shigaraki, I've brought Midoriya as you wanted. You were in luck that he ended up going to an underground fighting ring business that I was visiting at, so this happened quicker than I thought possible, 𝗳𝗏 said, and Shigaraki thanked 𝗳𝗏 and threw him money for doing the job. Shigaraki, Izuku said as he kept his guard up and they could all see it. Shigaraki moved forward a bit but stopped without getting too close to Izuku. Izuku Midoriya, to think the golden boy would fall from his position at UA. I am really curious about how this came to be, so before we get down to real business, why don't you tell us how this all happened, because I am quite interested in learning why you are a villain now. Shigaraki said as he glanced at Izuku and everyone else, who all wanted to know why Izuku was in the state he was in now. I am really curious about how this came to be, so before we get down to real business, why don't you tell us how this all happened, because I am quite interested in learning why you are a villain now. Shigaraki said as he glanced at Izuku, and he really has adapted and changed quite a bit. This is troubling in a lot of ways, Izuku thought as he looked around the room before looking back at Shigaraki. How much do you know about my quirk? Izuku asked, which confused everyone. Shigaraki seemed confused as well, which confirmed that Shigaraki did not in fact know about One for All, which was intriguing, and also Izuku knew he could spin this without revealing One for All. Shigaraki shook his head and asked what Izuku meant. Well, to hit the main point of why I ended up as I did, does anyone know what it means to be quirkless? Izuku said, and the room tensed but also looked confused as 𝗳𝗏 spoke up. Quirkless, to be born without a quirk, but you have one, so I don't see how that applies to you, 𝗳𝗏 said, and Izuku nodded his head. Indeed, to be born without a quirk, but it does have everything to do with me, because you can be born with a quirk and never know about it as well. For example, I lived over a decade of my life being quirkless since I didn't have my current quirk. I didn't activate it until the entrance exam for UA, where I blew up my arm and legs. As such, it has everything to do with me because I lived the life of a quirkless person for a decade, Izuku said, and their eyes widened at that declaration. Shigaraki was scratching his neck a bit, which Toga stopped him as she moved his hand away from his neck. Yue knew that my quirk didn't come in on time since All Might even personally trained me for months before Yue, since he believed I could be housing the said quirk I have now, but my first meeting with him wasn't as great as many would think. But I am jumping ahead of myself, Izuku said as he started back at the very start of his story. Izuku explained how he was declared quirkless because he showed no signs of a quirk, and then talked about how everyone turned their backs on him. He talked about the abuse at everyone's hands and how no one would stop any of it. He then went on to talk about his last year in middle school, where he was suicided baited by his former childhood friend 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗁, which caught all of their attention since he never said a name up to that point. Wait, you are telling me the brat that we kidnapped was your main abuser? 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗁 said as fire against 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗁's body. Izuku could see the rage in the man's eyes. Interesting. I am assuming he came from a household that was an abusive or similar backstory to me. Izuku thought but nodded his head to 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗁 to confirm it. Indeed, 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗁 was my main tormentor who continued his bullying for a decade against me. Even getting into UA, he continued some of his actions as well right in front of the teachers, where they never did anything. But first let me finish before I got to UA. Izuku said as everyone at this point was sitting down on a box or old furniture that was left in the building. So after being suicide baited, I retrieved my analysis book that Bakugo had used his quirk on and blew up with his quirk, which survived somewhat. After getting it, I took a long route home that day because I wanted to calm down my emotions. My mother, I am sure, never knew of a lot of what happened to me since I hid it so well. Even though she wasn't the most supportive, she still loved me. Anyway, I walked under an underpass where I was attacked by the sludge villain but got saved by All Might. This is my first actual meeting with All Might, which didn't end well. Izuku said as he remembered that day and what All Might told him. In honest truth, the words still bugged Izuku, but he couldn't do anything about it, and he still forgave All Might for them anyway. As All Might jumped away, I grabbed onto his leg like an idiot, but I needed to ask my question, the question that only All Might could give an answer to at this point, as everyone else always said no. The question I asked him on that rooftop was, if a quirkless person like me becomes a pro hero, does anyone want to take a guess what he said? What the symbol of peace, who said on all of the interviews and TV that anyone could be a hero, said. Izuku asked them all, but they had a guess what All Might said, and Shigaraki was, as he had disintegrated several things near him. He said, no. He said that without power, someone quirkless couldn't be a hero. That it was good to dream, but that I should be realistic. He told me to go be a cop or a nurse, but even in those jobs you really need a quirk due to regulations they impose, so realistically those were an option for a quirkless person. It was. Also on the rooftop where we had landed, where I learned about All Might's smaller form since he had run out of time that day. Izuku said, shocking them all, that Izuku knew about the form beforehand, but they kept silent. I heard an explosion in the distance, and like the fanboy nerd I was who liked to analyze quirks and people, I was about to go watch, but All Might's words came back in my mind. Shocking myself, my body ended up walking to the fight without me realizing it, which is where I found the sludge villain who had escaped due to me latching onto All Might's leg. Izuku said with a chuckle as he remembered that it could be considered karma for Bakugo to have been hit by the said villain after telling Izuku to kill himself. The villain had captured a hostage, which was none other than 𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗁. The heroes on site weren't really doing anything outside of the few containing the damage like the fire. But my stupid self ran out there aiming to save Bakugo because my body moved on its own. I ended up buying him a few seconds before All Might somehow was able to power up again and saved the day. I ended up getting scolded by the pro heroes that did nothing, while Bakugo was praised for being brave and his quirk. Even though his quirk caused a lot of damage in the area. Izuku said, and then he explained how he walked away still without receiving medical treatment from the first attack or having run out in the second time, which hero protocols state they should still do so. On my way home, after Bakugo yelled at me for saving him, which is stupid, All Might showed up for the second time. It was here where he offered to train me because of my quirk that I would later activate, because he knew I needed more body mass to be able to use my quirk. Somehow he thought I was worthy of his training, but I still sadly needed a quirk to become a hero. After months of training, I was able to activate my quirk at the exam, since All Might believed I was ready to be able to wield it in my body since it was so strong. Skipping the part where I destroy my legs and arms saving a girl in the exam, We get to the first day, Izuku said as he explained how 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 attempted to attack him in the quirk apprehension test and that his teacher threatened to expel him due to his uncontrollable quirk. Ironic, the school knew for a fact that I only had gained access to my quirk, since I know for a fact All Might knew, the principal knew, and Recovery Girl knew. It would have also been updated in my file as well, since I was registered as quirkless for the exam itself. Moving on to the second day, 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 tried to murder me in the first combat exam, which wasn't surprising, but I don't think he has ever gotten a true warning besides a scolding in class. Then we have the USJ, where we first meet Shigaraki, Izuku said, and Shigaraki straightened up at that point. You might wonder why I was so determined to interfere that day, and especially with All Might. Well, it was because I knew about his time limit and how close you were to actually kill him at that moment. At that time, I was also still trying to copy All Might since our quirks were similar, but mine has more aspects to it that I have been discovering, which isn't strange since I've had it less than a full year. Izuku said as he floated and black came out. Izuku then sat down again as he talked about how the school still hadn't helped him get his quirk under control and that it took an internship with an older pro hero to get it under control in 3 days when he had been at the school for a lot longer. Moving forward, we get past the Kamino battle and to more recent time, which I am going to skip ahead a bit. After a while, we gained our provisional licenses, which 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 failed to get, which resulted in him fighting me in ground beta since he blamed himself for All Might's fall, which is stupid. I got punished for that even though it was self-defense on my part. Then we have the work studies, which I end up at 𝗳𝗵𝗲𝗺 agency, who hated me. The man knew All Might had been training me and didn't see me as being worthy of being All Might's personal protege like I was, which I guess was true in the end, but oh well. The 𝗳𝗵𝗲𝗺 raid with overhaul, which you were all at, happened and we saved Eri from that bstrd. Izuku said as he explained a bit about the raid, but they knew parts as well since they were involved in it. Izuku then explained how in recent times Nizu had Gran Torino, who was his internship after the sports festival, training him. Turns out Nizu had him watching me, as Nizu had found my notebooks, which had a lot of details about pro heroes, my classmates, and others in them. They confiscated a lot of them, but Nizu believed I was selling information out to people, which I do have a network set up that 𝗳𝗏𝗻 will be requesting stuff from me on. The interrogation was more or less a clown show, as Nizu asked the questions instead of the detective asking them. He talked about my past and how I had all of the motive to sell them out. I ended up being arrested since I admitted to the notebooks being mine, and well, I do have my network now, don't I? Anyway, the Hero Commission took interest in the case, so I was to be transferred to them, so I think Nizu was wanting the questions to be done with quickly, so I was framed as the UA mole that helped you all get into the USJ and attack the camp based on what they released to the media. Though that is complete bullshit that they are claiming, since I've never done that, but all of the interactions you had with me, Shigaraki, like the mall and me being alone for a while at the camp, convinced them I had sold them out to you. Izuku said as he finished his story. The room was silent and Izuku wondered if he screwed up. What the F is your life? 𝗳𝗵𝗶 said, and twice just fell over at the comment from 𝗳𝗵𝗶. I don't know, but this is my life now. I wanted to be a hero to change things, but sadly it seems I can't change things inside of the system like I wanted to anymore. Izuku said with a sad tone and a shake of his head. Shigaraki got up and everyone watched him move towards Izuku, who was on guard. Society heroes, those that you trusted to care for you, have abandoned you. I plan to wipe it all out, so I'll make my offer. Join us, Izuku Midoriya, and help us destroy those that harmed you. Shigaraki said as he raised a hand with a glove on all fingers but one. Everyone watched Izuku, who looked at Shigaraki's hand. This was it, and Izuku accepted his new fate as tears went down his face and he accepted the hand offered to him. Forgive me, All Might, Izuku thought as he took a hold of his new future. It's time for change to happen, Izuku said as he looked up at Shigaraki's face, who had a large grin on his face. Izuku Midoriya had successfully infiltrated the League of Villains. As Izuku was accepted into the League of Villains, they took him to their base, which was a hideout in the middle of a forest area. Overall, Izuku discovered that the League of Villains was in a critical state for their resources, but 𝗳𝗏𝗻 had mentioned they were still able to produce nomas, so something didn't add up to Izuku, but he held off on asking, since if he pushed for too much information right out the gate then he would be raising a lot of flags. As such, Izuku just went with it but did decide to ask what the current plan that the League is doing since he needed to know how to help with whatever was going on. Shigaraki scratched his neck and sighed as Izuku asked that, and everyone looked at Shigaraki since even they didn't know what the League would be doing next. So I take it there is nothing going on right now, Izuku said, and twice confirmed there was indeed nothing going on with his two answers, which confused Izuku a bit, but he was able to figure it out. We do have the Nomu from the doctor that we could use, but got to remember he won't hand us all of the Nomu over since he wants you to prove your capabilities, 𝗳𝗵𝗃 said as he spoke, and Shigaraki nodded his head before turning to Izuku. By the way, I believe Jiren said the villain name you picked is the accused one. I'm just going to call you accused since it's easier. Anyway, do you happen to have any smart ideas on how we can increase our funding? Shigaraki asked, and Izuku choked on the water he was drinking since that came out of nowhere. Twice smacked Izuku's back, helping him get the water out of his system since he was still choking a bit, since Izuku didn't expect to be asked that. I didn't expect that question, quickly. Not really. We could go steal resources from other villain groups to start gathering funds for ourselves. I don't think robbing a bank or anything is a good idea, since it would be a surefire way to get the attention of heroes on us quickly, since they still want to take the League down due to the battle at 𝗵𝗃, so a lot of strong heroes would quickly respond to any sighting of us. Izuku said, and Shigaraki nodded his head as he thought it over. As he was doing that, Spinner spoke up as he said there were some villain groups that hate people with physical mutation quirks that they could go after, which caught everyone's attention as Shigaraki asked where they were located at. As this was going on, Eraserhead was going over security footage, documents, and many other things from Izuku Midoriya's life in the present and of the boy's past. Eraserhead wanted to try and discover anything that would prove that there was something that forced Izuku Midoriya to do what he has done against his will. He knew a lot of what Izuku Midoriya had gone through based on what Katsuki Bakugo had told him, but there was also evidence that supported that Izuku did what he did. One thing was the multiple quirks that were appearing, as it made no logical sense for those quirks to appear together. That was something that smelled fishy as hell, since the villain at 𝗵𝗃 had the ability to give and take quirks, which didn't paint a better picture for Izuku Midoriya. Soon though, Eraserhead remembered something about what Bakugo had told him that the boy seemed to have not meant to say. It was something about the connection between All Might and Midoriya. Bakugo, he said something about the quirk connecting them, but he tensed when he realized what he said. All Might knows something. Eraserhead thought as he decided to go get some answers from the man himself. As such, he crossed the campus from dorm apartment in the staff dorms to the main building where All Might was currently at, or was meant to be at based on the last text the man sent to the staff chat. As Eraserhead arrived at the office location, which he knew didn't have any hidden cameras or recording devices, he opened the door quickly and found All Might sitting in the room looking over files which he tried to hide quickly. "What are you hiding?" Eraserhead said as he moved quickly across the room to see the files which All Might was still trying to hide. Eraserhead saw that the files were documents about Izuku Midoriya. "Ah, I take it you're looking into his life like I am, though I guess we both already had the same plan in mind, as something is fishy about the entire thing," Eraserhead said, and All Might calmed down and put everything back as he forgot Eraserhead was likely already looking into it from what All Might knew previously. All Might was just being careful since he didn't need others blocking him from looking into it. Indeed, the detective also believes something is wrong, and so does Mirio, since the boy came to me since he refuses to believe what is going on. I think we just need to combine our efforts so we don't waste time. All Might said, and Eraserhead nodded his head. Indeed, but first you need to inform me of what you have been hiding from me, Eraserhead said, and All Might seemed confused until Eraserhead mentioned what Bakugo had said and that fact that Izuku had multiple quirks showing lately, which All Might curse in English at. "Fine, but I need the detective here, don't get me wrong, but with the entire mole thing going on I just need to play it safe and have you answer a few questions from him, then I will tell you," All Might said, and Eraserhead nodded his head as he told him to call the detective to come to the school. However, it was decided that they would leave the school to go meet the detective in a place without cameras or anything else, so the meeting could happen in secret so that not even Nizu could hack a device nearby to hear or see them. They arrived outside of a bar that Eraserhead recognized as one that underground heroes tended to use to trade information with contacts in secured rooms. It was how the bar sustained itself, even though it wasn't in the best place for a bar. After sitting down and ordering basic drinks and a snack, the detective started to question Izuku and asked if he was a mole or was in contact with any villains. He also asked if he was being forced to provide information to others against his will or was he willing to agree to do so. Everything came back clear and the detective said that the questions he just asked were how the questions Izuku Midoriya should have been asked, but 𝗍𝗂 didn't do it as he should have. Whatever is going on, I think 𝗍𝗂 has a hand in it, the detective said, which caused both 𝗬𝗍𝗄 and Izuku to tense a bit since that was a large but issue if their boss was somehow involved in the mess. Soon they moved on to the topic of Izuku Midoriya's quirk and let it be said that Eraserhead was with 𝗬𝗍𝗄 for putting so much pressure on the boy. I should have been informed from the start that he was in my class. His broken hands and scars from the quirk is on your head, 𝗬𝗍𝗄. The moment he broke his bones the first 2 times should have been a call straight to Gran Torino, since he taught the boy to control the quirk in 3 days while you had many months. I also share some blame for not recognizing he only had the quirk for so short, since if I dug into his file I would have seen the fact he signed up for the exam as quirkless. Eraserhead said, and 𝗬𝗍𝗄 admitted it was indeed his fault for Izuku's broken hands and damaged body. However, before things got even further, the detective decided to inform them why he wanted them to meet at the bar instead of at UA. Turns out the kid is already making a name for himself, the detective said, and Eraserhead didn't like the sound of that. The detective showed the note and bag of evidence he had brought. It seems he has picked a villain name out for himself. He has chosen the accused one as his villain name. He stole some new clothing off a criminal as the man, and some others were going to wrap a woman. Here is the note he left, the detective said as he handed a copy of the note to both of them to read. Overall, the note read as the following: with my back against the wall, the path I am now on shall be one filled with chaos, and I will gladly bear the burden. Until next time, 𝗍𝗂. Read the short note, and that just confirmed for them that 𝗍𝗂 had some important role in this entire mess that had been created. The rat, he has something to do with all of this. The way he did the questions, the way he asked Midoriya if he would be forgiven. Something doesn't feel right about this at all, Eraserhead said, and the others could only agree, but they didn't know what was wrong with the entire situation. Eraserhead then looked at the detective and asked him if he has questioned Izuku Midoriya, and the detective's face twisted a bit, which confused them. She has lawyered up with the top lawyers of the country. I don't know how she is affording them to begin with, but they won't let her answer any questions, so I have been unable to ask her anything without them blocking me. I have to go through them for any official matter, which makes it impossible to get anything, the detective said, and 𝗬𝗍𝗄 was shocked since he knew for a fact that the Midoriyas couldn't afford such lawyers, because even he would have to pay quite a bit for them to represent him. Something didn't feel right whatsoever. What if I were to go ask her questions? I am not a pro hero anymore, nor a cop. All I am is a retired pro hero that works for UA. 𝗬𝗍𝗄 said, and the detective said it could work since legally the detective has to contact the lawyers if he wanted to question her, since she's already directed him to them once. As such, it was decided that 𝗬𝗍𝗄 would go visit Izuku Midoriya and see if there was anything he could gain out of the situation. It had been about 2 weeks since that meeting that 𝗬𝗍𝗄, Eraserhead, and the detective had together in the secured room in the bar that underground pro heroes used a lot. 𝗬𝗍𝗄 need to time his so-called accidental meeting with Izuku Midoriya, since 𝗍𝗂 seemed to have been keeping a closer eye on all of them whenever they were in UA. They had no proof, but they felt as if they were being watched more often, and there was no real good place to speak about Izuku Midoriya without 𝗍𝗂 finding out in UA. As such, when 𝗬𝗍𝗄 needed to go off campus for an already scheduled doctor's appointment at a hospital, he decided to make a stop before returning to UA since he didn't have any classes for the day. This was how 𝗬𝗍𝗄 found himself in front of Izuku Midoriya's front door, where he knocked on it and waited for it to be opened. After a few minutes, the door opened and there stood one Izuku Midoriya, whose eyes widened greatly at seeing 𝗬𝗍𝗄. I'm sorry, but I can't talk to you. You need to leave, Izuku said before starting to close the door, but 𝗬𝗍𝗄 put his foot in the doorway, stopping it. Mrs. Midoriya, please hear me out. I feel as if something is off about young Midoriya's situation. I just want to help him. Please, 𝗬𝗍𝗄 said with his eyes begging to be let in. Izuku froze at what 𝗬𝗍𝗄 said, and she decided to let him in against her better judgment, as she was more or less risking her son's life if the mission somehow got out. Izuku brought him in and had him sit down as she made some tea. Why are you here, 𝗬𝗍𝗄? Didn't UA give you the reasons why my son has turned out like this? 𝗵𝗃𝗀 asked, and All Might said that they did, but there were those that believed differently. I am working with another teacher and the detective with the lie detector quirk. The entire situation is fishy and I don't believe Izuku would have ever done this. I believe he is being forced or blackmailed into doing what he is doing. All Might said, and 𝗵𝗃𝗀 tensed slightly, which All Might noticed. She knows something, but the question is what? All Might thought as he took a drink of his tea. I have found out about the abuse that Izuku went through at the hands of his previous schools and everything else. He indeed would have many reasons to turn, but the person I knew wouldn't have done it even with everything else going on. I admit I failed him even more, but I still don't believe he is doing this willing, so, please, if you know anything that can help me save him, then I need to know. All Might said as he begged her to provide anything. He could see her grip the teacup a bit tightly as her knuckles turned slightly white. All Might, what would you do for him if he really was doing it without being threatened? What if he truly turned? 𝗵𝗃𝗀 asked as she looked at him in the eyes. All Might knew to watch his words carefully because for some reason this felt as if it was a test. I don't know, all I know is that Izuku Midoriya is a kind boy that I know would have his reasons for doing whatever he was doing, and I would try to turn him back to a better path as I walk it along with him. All Might said, and she sighed as she set her teacup down. In all honesty, Izuku Midoriya didn't know what to do, because if she gave anything up to about the mission then it could lead to her own son's death, but her son was working out there without much support either. I think it's time for you to leave, All Might. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 said, and All Might was caught off guard but stood up as she did. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 stepped next to the counter for a second as All Might stepped towards the door. As she directed him out of the door, she reached to him and suddenly hugged him out of nowhere. Thank you for still caring for my son, but I don't have anything I can help you with. Nice coat, by the way. 𝗵𝗃𝗀 said as she let go and closed the door behind him. All Might sighed in disappointment as he went to his truck, in which he drove off in. As All Might came to a stop sign on a street a few blocks away, he felt something move inside of his coat pocket. What is this? All Might said as he pulled the object out, which was a note card that he had felt. Nothing was written on the front of it until he turned it to the back and saw something written. What? All Might said, confused as to what he saw written on it. What is the meaning of this? I know I didn't have a note card in my pocket. Wait, she said, nice coat, and she had suddenly hugged me. This is from Izuku Midoriya, but why this name? All Might thought as he drove forward, as he sent a message to both the detective and Eraserhead to meet him at the bar location as soon as possible since classes were already out for the day. All Might, of course, was the first to arrive, but the other two arrived about minutes later and found All Might sitting in the secured room with a note card that appeared blank to them. What did she tell you? The detective asked, and All Might shook his head. She wouldn't tell me anything, but she did ask me what I would do if he did it willingly. It felt like a test question from her, and I think I got the reward. She gave me this note card, and written on the back is a name. I am sure I didn't have this on me when I put my coat on today. All Might said as he turned the note card around, and it showed a name. The name was none other than 𝗵𝗃𝗃 himself. What? Why would 𝗵𝗃𝗃 be involved? Wait. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had 𝗵𝗃𝗃 on campus for a bit of time before he had Izuku Midoriya detained, didn't he? The detective pointed out, which they both realized that it was true. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had claimed that 𝗵𝗃𝗃 was there for a while before the arrest happened, which didn't make sense if 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had proof already that determined that Izuku was the mole, since 𝗵𝗃𝗃 would just arrest Izuku Midoriya outright without waiting. There was also the risk of tipping Izuku off that he was being found out. All we can do is ask 𝗵𝗃𝗃 about his involvement in this. Wait, a bit before the arrest happened, 𝗵𝗃𝗃 had approved Izuku Midoriya to take Eri off campus, which 𝗵𝗃𝗃 went with them. If 𝗵𝗃𝗃 truly believed Izuku to be the mole, then why would he let him take Eri off campus with only 𝗵𝗃𝗃 watching? I know the man is good, but the problem child could have escaped most likely and held Eri hostage if he even found anything slightly off, if his cover of a mole was blown. Eraserhead said, remembering how Midoriya had indeed taken Eri off campus. All Might asked if they knew where Izuku had taken Eri, since they might get lucky and see something on cameras nearby. The detective said he could access camera feeds that are outside of the school and track Izuku Midoriya down to see if they could figure something out. They could also consider asking Eri what happened that day, which Izuku said he would do when he got home, since it would just be Eri, present Mike, an eraser since Hitoshi lived in the dorms even though he got adopted by Eraserhead and Present Mic the last semester. They decided they would hold off on asking Gran Torino anything since the man might keep silent if he knew anything, even if All Might asked, because the man didn't give All Might any warning before now about all of this, so it stood to reason that he would keep silent if confronted. If they could gain anything that would prove that Izuku Midoriya was being forced, then they could use it to try and force something out of Gran Torino. All might want to access the footage on campus, but Nizu had already granted access to the footage, but Aizawa wasn't finding anything. Though unknown to them all, Nizu had edited the security footage, and unless you were paying really close attention to very small details, then you wouldn't notice the fact that some of the footage looped in some moments, which would be where Izuku Midoriya was at when he went to Nizu's office each time or used the tunnels that were in blind spots of cameras. They separated from each other so that Eraserhead and All Might could arrive at the campus at different times and not raise any flags on them coming together. As Eraserhead arrived on campus late in the afternoon with the sun having already gone down for the day, he entered his apartment to find one Present Mic and Eri. Present Mic welcomed his husband home but noticed he seemed off. "Hey sweetie, can I ask you something?" Aizawa said using a soft tone of voice. Eri looked up at him and nodded her head as she played with her doll. Present Mic was confused about what he was asking until he heard the question. "Sweetie, when Midoriya took you to the park a while back, do you remember if he said anything that stood out to you or seemed strange?" Aizawa asked, and as Eri was moving to put her doll into a spot she froze up. Both Eraserhead and Present Mic noticed it even though Eri tried to hide it with different actions. "What the hell did you talk about, problem child?" Aizawa thought as he watched Eri deny that anything stood out to her. "We played in the park," she said without saying anything else, which was odd for her since she would always talk about the smallest thing if she was with Izuku Midoriya doing anything since he was such a large factor in her life. She knows something but won't say. The question is why. Aizawa thought as he thanked her and went to his room. Present Mic waited a few moments before going into the bedroom as well with the door closed behind him. "Why did you ask that?" Present Mic asked, and Aizawa filled his husband in on everything about the situation since the detective had already cleared Present Mic as well from being the mole a few days ago when Present Mic left campus, so Nizu couldn't easily learn about it. Though who was Aizawa kidding? Aizawa was sure the principal knew about everything that was going on. "I think problem child told Eri something since he is a huge part of her life. He's leaving out of nowhere should have had a larger effect on her, but it hasn't. She cried a bit the first day, but overall she hasn't had a large change which stands out. From what we know at the moment, we think Izuku Midoriya is being forced into the position he is in. We also believe Nizu and Gran Torino are both in on whatever is going on as well, since Izuku Midoriya gave a note card with Gran Torino's name to All Might when he went and visited her today," Aizawa said, and Present Mic nodded his head. Nothing about the situation they are looking into seemed clear-cut, and Aizawa was going to find out the truth. With the passing of the weeks, it has now been 2 months total since Izuku had joined up with the League of Villains. Many things have happened during this time, but some of the main things that had happened were that Izuku had started to make public appearances with the League of Villains, cementing his ties to the group. The very first public appearance he went out on was when the League went to secure more resources, which turned into a bit of a small battle as the group they went after tried opposing the League when the League only wanted to steal the resources from the group. Though, in the end, the opposing group was wiped out as 𝗳𝗵𝗃 had burned the members alive when they had made quirkish comments against Spinner due to his mutations. This battle had drawn the attention of some local heroes who were passing by in the area, and Izuku decided to take them on to avoid any members of the League killing the said heroes, since Izuku knew for a fact that they would have been beaten then killed, while Izuku had already expressed his distaste for outright killing to the other members of the League. However, Izuku had zero hesitation from breaking bones quickly and leaving the heroes unable to come after the League, which satisfied the League's views with him. Though defeating those two heroes did start making a public name for him unlike his underground name, as people were paying more attention to the fact that Izuku Midoriya had indeed joined the League, which made them all believe he was indeed the one that leaked UA's information to the villain side. Izuku has also been making contact with Nizu via his network system, where he would send analysis to Nizu that he had requested, but encoded in it would be messages from Izuku to Nizu, who was able to decode the information quickly due to his high-spec quirk. Some of the information that Izuku had passed so far was basic things since the coded messages couldn't be super long due to the length of his analysis that he sent. The information so far included the fact that there was another unknown member of the League that was simply called the Doctor, who was the one truly producing the 𝗵𝗃, and that Shigaraki currently needed to prove himself worthy of receiving the man's assistance to keep receiving more 𝗵𝗃s. Other information included the fact that the League was currently running low on resources as they were stealing from other villain organizations to start building up a war chest, or the fact that the League did have one 𝗵𝗃 on standby that Izuku had yet to see but did have hints that it was as strong or on a higher strength level than the one from the USJ, with some different quirks. Overall, the information was a mixed bag of good news and bad news for the hero side, as Izuku had already learned some critical pieces of information like a hidden member that was the actual person creating the 𝗵𝗃s. Though Izuku still had no clue on how the League was able to get the location of the summer camp, though Izuku expected that the USJ was done via Kurogiri warping into the building, but that doesn't answer the camp issue. As Izuku sends his most recent update to Nizu, he sighs and pushes the laptop away from himself. In all, honestly, a quarter of the League's finances were now coming from Izuku himself due to his analysis that he has been doing on other villains for 𝗳𝗏𝗏. There has been some analysis done on some heroes, but Izuku would decline them for various reasons, such as not having much information on them or him being busy. Though he had done some on pro heroes he believed were corrupt, though he did send a warning to Nizu about the pro heroes that would be targeted so Nizu could plan around Izuku's analysis. So far, none of the heroes have been killed, since Nizu would have the said heroes reassigned, or the commission would suddenly arrest said corrupted heroes with the proof that Izuku would provide. It looked far better for the commission and government to arrest the said heroes that they may very well have known about instead of letting them get killed, which would damage faith in heroes overall, as the public likes to see the government crack down on heroes, as it meant the government doing its job. Moving away from his table he was working at in the base in the forest, Izuku decided he would go out since he had been caged up in the forest hideout for quite some time, since their last mission out was about a week ago. Izuku moved to the main room where he found the others and spoke up, catching their attention. "I'm going to go out since I feel caged up in here since I haven't been out for about a week now. Anyone want to join me?" Izuku asked, and no wanted to go, but some did have things they wanted to be grabbed from a store, which Izuku agreed to do so. He decided to take some of the money he earned and would buy the stuff since he didn't want to draw attention to himself over petty theft. Izuku waved his hand and told them he would be back as soon as he can, since he wanted to enjoy the fresh air for a bit first before returning. As Izuku left the hideout, over in another portion of the city was one underground pro hero, Eraserhead, who was going out on patrol as he was moving between cities that were surrounding the areas that his problem child had been sighted in before. He was doing this in hopes of finding the said problem child, Izuku Midoriya, because just recently Eraserhead, All Might, and the detective had made a breakthrough in the unofficial case looking into Izuku Midoriya. The breakthrough was the fact that they were finally able to locate the security footage they needed to with a view of the park that Izuku had taken Eri to. The city cameras didn't give them a view of where Izuku was in the park but only saw him enter it, so they had been at a dead end until recently when Eraserhead had discovered that a building next to the park had a clear view with audio of the spot that Izuku, Eri, and Gran Torino were at. Overall, the audio was limited in what it picked up, but it picked up enough to provide the clues to the point they believed they were right in their theory that Izuku was being forced. The portions they heard were, "I am Eri, no matter I will your hero, but backs are against the wall," is what they heard on the recording, which made Aizawa remember a constant theme that he has heard the entire time during this entire mess. He had pointed out to the others that Izuku Midoriya had repeatedly stated that backs were against the wall, which leads to them believing that they were correct in that somehow he is being forced or blackmailed into the situation he was in because someone's life may be in danger. This increased the determination that Eraserhead had to find Izuku Midoriya, even if it was pure luck that he found him, because he wanted to know the truth, as they haven't confronted Gran Torino yet but would be doing it soon in the coming days. Hitoshi had noticed the sudden increase in night patrols that his father had been doing, which he asked, but Eraserhead said he needed to find someone due to a case, which he left the conversation at that. Though Hitoshi had a feeling that his father was actually searching for Izuku Midoriya, which Shinso had mixed feelings about. Hitoshi always thought of Izuku Midoriya as the golden boy but got proven wrong with the truth of Izuku's past came to light as Bakugo had admitted to what he had done to both classes. The situation with 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 has been tense for the past 2 months or so since he admitted to what had happened to Izuku Midoriya, but he was still in the hero course since Eraserhead didn't want to get rid of him yet as he was improving and had been changing. Eraserhead also admitted that they failed Izuku Midoriya since they didn't realize what was going on at the start of the year and allowed things to continue in UA, so the school shared some blame. Though things did change in the dorms slightly as 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 had gotten on his knees as he asked both classes to help him turn Izuku Midoriya back to the path of good. The class accepted his plea for help and he was mending relationships as best as he could as he had actually gained his provisional license this exact night as 𝗲𝗵𝗃 had taken both Todoroki and 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 to complete their makeup exam and would be returning to UA late in the evening. Though it would seem people are fated to meet, as while Izuku was out finishing his shopping he noticed a commotion going on in the distance, so he decided to see what was going on. As he came up through an alleyway he saw what was going on, which shocked him. "Oh, seems you finally have your provisional license, Kaken," Izuku thought as he watched both 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 and Todoroki fight some villains in the street as people were being evacuated. Izuku decided it was time to leave since he needed to get back to the hideout, so he started to walk away, but sadly fate seems to always dislike Izuku Midoriya as he felt the danger sense quirk go off. Izuku decided it was time to leave since he needed to get back to the hideout, so he started to walk away, but sadly fate seems to always dislike Izuku Midoriya as he felt the danger sense quirk go off. Now you might wonder, when the hell did he get this quirk? Well, he actually got it during all of the times the League was going out and raiding other villain groups for funds. There was a villain who could conceal their presence even to the naked eye, which triggered the quirk of the fourth user of One for All to come out to ensure Izuku's survival, as he ended up going against this individual. It was a close call since the person was a bit skillful compared to the other villains, but once Izuku had danger since he was able to defeat the individual within a few minutes due to the quirk triggering where the attacker was coming from. Now, back to why danger sense was going off in the alley. Turns out that Izuku's luck or fate is pure SHT, as he was halfway down the alleyway when none other than Eraserhead dropped into the alleyway. "Stop right there, Izuku!" Eraserhead yelled out as he prepared his capture weapon. "God damn it, this is going to be troubling if those two hear a fight going on," Izuku thought as he looked at his former teacher in the eyes with a blank expression that made Eraserhead slightly flinch since he's never seen his former student like this. "Didn't you hear? The name now is accused. I suggest you leave, Eraserhead, or you might not go home tonight," Izuku said as he turned One for All on slightly to release some pressure. Izuku remembers how All Might said that the quirk pressure acted in a way that made people feel calm, since that is what he intended for it to do, but it could also cause fear when he faced enemies that invoked in anger. Eraserhead just kept his fighting position firm and took a step forward. "DMN, he really won't let me go. I need to think of something," Izuku thought. "Seems you won't let me go, fine then," Izuku said as he quickly grabbed a trash can lid and tossed it as a weapon, since he used One for All with the throw, so the lid became a very powerful tool. As he threw it, Eraserhead had to dodge out of the way, but that gave Izuku time to get close for a punch, but Izuku changed his movement at the last second due to danger sense. Got to love this quirk, Izuku thought as it warned him that Eraserhead was going to catch his punch and throw him over his shoulder. As such, Izuku dropped low and swiped Eraserhead's feet from under him. "What?" Eraserhead said, startled, since Izuku was fighting better than the man ever predicted of Izuku in the short period of time, which honestly was greatly due to danger sense, which alerted him of dangers in his fights. He also did spar with the others as well, which helped him as well since they all had unique fighting styles, which forced him to grow as well. "Didn't you always say never underestimate your opponent?" Izuku said as he dropped the bags on the ground and grabbed Eraserhead in his arms and tossed him into the wall. This though caused a bit of noise, which drew the attention of 2 provisional heroes and 1 retired hero. 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 heard a shout which he thought sounded like their homeroom teacher. "Oi, did you hear that?" 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 asked, which confused All Might and Todoroki, who raised an eyebrow, but then they heard another shout which they all 3 heard. "Is that sensei?" Todoroki said, and 𝗵𝘃𝗁𝗁 took off running towards the sound with All Might and Todoroki right behind him. Though All Might was a bit slower due to his age and form, as such both 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 and Todoroki were further ahead of him for a few minutes. Once both came to the alleyway, they came to a stop due to what they saw as they entered the alleyway, as they found their homeroom teacher being held by an arm behind his back. Though the reason they were in shock the most was because of who had Eraserhead in that hold, this individual was none other than Izuku Midoriya. "Oh, seems I caused a bit too much noise defeating you, Eraserhead, though this fight was a bit one-sided since you underestimated me. I think it's time we go our separate ways," Izuku said as he threw his former teacher across the alleyway into Todoroki, who caught the teacher. Izuku grabbed his bags and was about to walk away when a voice called out to him. "Young Midoriya," came the voice, and Izuku knew who it was without a doubt. It was none other than All Might himself, the user of One for All. I did not see him earlier. Damn it, I had no plans to see him again this soon, Izuku thought as he had frozen up in dread at hearing All Might's voice. Izuku pushed his emotions down the best as he could as Eraserhead balanced himself as he stood with most likely a broken arm and warned his side to be careful. "Ah, if it isn't the symbol of peace, why would you be out here, All Might? Quite foolish of you, since someone might end up finishing you off," Izuku said with a cold tone on the outside, but he was beating himself up inside as he hated how he was talking to his own MSTR. He hated this so much. All Might, though unaware of Izuku's inner feelings, pressed forward as he stepped in front of the two students who were staring directly at Izuku without saying anything, though it was clear they both wanted to say something. "Young Midoriya, please stop this and come with us. There has to be a way out of this, as I refuse to believe you truly turned your back on UA without being forced to do so. Please, my boy, come back to us," All Might said with a tear down the man's face, which ate at Izuku inside. "Sorry, All Might, but I don't know why you believed in me. The person you knew needed to be sacrificed for survival. Also, get the name right, as it's accused now," Izuku said as he started to walk away, but Bakugo and Todoroki weren't going to let him go, it seems, as they both came charging at him. "Sadly for you too, I can sense you coming," Izuku thought, as danger sense was providing him a way to avoid their attacks, which he did just like that without turning around as he dodged to the left to avoid the ice and then did a quick backflip over Bakugo as he kicked off him and onto the roof out of Eraserhead's view, since the man had turned his eraser quirk on. The moment Izuku was on the rooftop is when he turned Float and One for All on as he quickly got out of the area. That was too close for comfort, Izuku thought as he moved further and further away as he took detours and headed to a completely different city before heading towards the hideout. In a completely opposite direction. Izuku finally arrived back at the hideout and everyone looked at him as he had some BLD on his face from when he threw Eraserhead into the wall and made some open wounds on the man. "What?" Izuku asked as he wondered why they were looking at him. Toga said he looked cute when he had BLD on him, which confused him until he wiped his face and found the BLD. He must have splattered some BLD when he hit the wall, Izuku muttered as Dabi asked what happened. Izuku sighed as he looked in a mirror and cleaned himself up after setting the bags on the counter. "On my way back I heard a commotion and looked to see what was going on from an alleyway. I saw Katsuki, Bakugo and Shudo Todoroki fighting some villains that started to rob places and people. They didn't see me, but turns out Eraserhead was in the area and noticed me. As I was leaving, he dropped in front of me and we fought. I won and he has a broken arm or something. I left as the two new provisional heroes heard the fight, but All Might was there as well, which caused me some issues. Even though I had issues with the man, he still trained me for a while, so I have emotions still attached to him. I threw Eraserhead at them and escaped as I dodged some of their attacks and got out of Eraser's view, which gave me my quirk back. Don't worry about any tails, as I went to completely different cities in the opposite direction before going into the sky, as I used clouds to cover my flight here," Izuku said as he finished cleaning himself up and sat down to eat as Toga warmed up the food they had made for dinner for Izuku since he missed it. "Thank you," Izuku said to her, and she nodded her head. Soon the conversations picked back up again to what they were before he arrived with BLD on him, but while this happened, a group of individuals arrived back at UA, where they took one of them to the nurse's office where Recovery Girl was waiting even though it was past her normal hours. She was warned that Eraserhead had been injured in a fight and needed medical care, but when they arrived there they found Nizu, Present Mike, Hitoshi, Gran Torino, who had moved on campus after the arrest, the detective, and Recovery Girl waiting for them all. Present Mike asked what happened and Eraserhead sighed deeply. I underestimated him. I underestimated Izuku Midoriya and had my butt handed to me. He has gotten really good in close combat since he escaped. I think the worst of it is a broken arm and then some cuts on my face from getting slammed into a wall in the alleyway. Eraserhead said, and present Mike gaps a bit as Hitoshi clenched his hands. Young Bakugo and Todoroki attempted to get him, but even with his quirk suppressed, young Midoriya was able to dodge their attacks without even seeing them coming. I don't know how he did it. All Might said, but Nizu had a clue. Since they had looked into the past user's quirks, which one quirk would likely allow such things, and it was called Danger Sense. Though Nizu wasn't going to say anything about it. Soon, Eraserhead was healed up and his arm was put into a sling to help pull stress off of it, since it was the lower portion of his arm that had broken a bit with only pulled muscles in the upper portions. Everyone went back to do their own things as Eraserhead was going to be off the streets for a few days due to his injury, since Recovery Girl would heal it in sessions to speed it up instead of doing it all in one go due to Eraserhead's lack of sleep all of the time. Though, the group conducting the unofficial investigation still wanted to confront Gran Torino in the coming few days but were unable to since the man had disappeared. When Nizu was asked, he only told them that the man was searching for Izuku Midoriya and was going out for a long period of time as he would stay in the area he was searching. Though, in truth, Gran Torino was doing a meetup with one Izuku Midoriya due to disturbing information that they had gained via the coded messages that requested a meetup. The reason that Izuku had requested to physically meet was to inform Gran Torino of the horrifying truth of what he discovered. As such, we can SWCH back to one Izuku Midoriya to see what he had discovered in the few days before Gran Torino was going to be questioned by the others. A few days after Izuku defeated Eraserhead and escape, he learned some disturbing information as he came face to face with the giant that Gran Torino had faced. As everyone was sitting in the hideout, the ground started to shake, which caused them all to go outside to see what it was. They were shocked to see a giant that suddenly laid waste to their hideout building in one strike as he broke the ground. Everyone was confused about who this individual was, but Izuku wasn't. If I remember correctly from the little information I heard, I believe this is 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲. Izuku said, and the monster turned slightly to Izuku, who spoke and sniffed before his face turned into one of rage. Everyone was confused, why the giant in front of them suddenly got enraged as the giant pulled his arm back ready to attack but was stopped by a voice calling out to him. Everyone was confused, why the giant in front of them suddenly got enraged as the giant pulled his arm back ready to attack but was stopped by a voice calling out to him, 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲, calm down. That young man isn't opposed to the 𝗵𝘃𝗲. The legacy has fallen to our side, called out the voice from the radio on the giant's neck. The giant suddenly stopped as Shigaraki spoke up, as he recognized the voice, which surprised Izuku as Shigaraki said it was the doctor's voice. That is the doctor's voice. It seems familiar to me for some reason. Izuku thought but didn't put much time into it, since he was staring at a giant that had a radio on his neck that somehow knew Izuku was holding the legacy, which Izuku knew meant one for all. The giant seemed confused, and so did the others on what was going on about a legacy. Remember why you are there, 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲. You are there to test the successor of All for One, Tomura Shigaraki, said the doctor's voice, which the giant nodded his head at but spoke as well as the giant asked if Shigaraki was truly the successor of All for One as he asks him to prove his worthiness. This triggered a battle between the League of Villains and the giant, which even with Izuku's ability to go to %1 for all proved impossible to win currently, as they were all wiped out due to the overwhelming power of the giant. Dear God! How is he so strong as he can take %1 for all? Izuku thought as his body was sore from being thrown around like a ragdoll. Even using the other quirks only allowed Izuku to cause some damage to the monster, as he was the one that caused the most damage and lasted the longest due to Danger Sense giving him so much help, but at one point Izuku just got so exhausted that the giant defeated Izuku. Soon though the giant stopped as they could hear 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲 complain that the 𝗵𝘃𝗲's successor was weak. Even though he obtained the legacy, he himself is weak with his men. The legacy was the strongest, though not to its full power. 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲 said as he burst into tears. At this point, the doctor calms back on again and introduces 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲 as All for One's loyal bodyguard, which freaked Izuku out since he was sure none of the past users knew of this, or they decided not to clue him in on it the last time they talked when he got Danger Sense. 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗲 tells the doctor that he wants to accept Tomura Shigaraki, especially since he obtained the allegiance of the legacy, but he was still too weak. It was then that the doctor explained that 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 possessed multiple quirks but was sent into hiding after 𝗵𝗃 received his initial injury by All Might. 𝗳𝗵𝗃 yells out that this isn't a nice gift from the old leader, which the doctor agrees with since he says that 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃 is fiercely loyal to 𝗵𝗃, which means gaining the loyalty will be a challenge that has somewhat been accomplished with the allegiance of the legacy, which against confuses everyone once again on what the legacy he was talking about. The giant was about to start attacking once again, but luckily the doctor plays the voice of 𝗵𝗃, which calms down the giant, who falls asleep to it. As they all look at the destruction, they relax a bit since the giant isn't trying to kill them anymore, but at this point, Shigaraki claims he doesn't want 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃, which earns a response from the doctor that tells Shigaraki that he spent far too much time being treated as a child by Kurohige, who provided nearly everything Shigaraki wanted without having him work for it. As Shigaraki looked ready to respond, the doctor tells Shigaraki to grow up, and then suddenly they all are coughing as sludge comes out of their mouths. Soon they found themselves inside of a different location, which turned out to be the secret lab of the doctor. They looked around and saw 𝗵𝗃s in tanks, but not like any they have seen before, as the doctor spoke up and said they were called high-end 𝗵𝗃s that he was creating. They were almost his masterpieces, he said. Though Shigaraki decides to ask the doctor if he could replicate the quirk-destroying bullets, which made Izuku worried if the doctor could truly do so without having Ares BLD. The doctor did agree to attempt to replicate them, and as he agreed, Mr. Compress tried to get a better view of the doctor, which made the doctor go deeper into the lab where he couldn't be seen, as he warned them all to not get close or else he would send them right back to 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃, which promoted twice to complain since the man was the individual who teleported them here. 𝗳𝗵𝗃 though decided to ask why they were there anyway, which the doctor said he rather did not give his location, so he teleported them all to the lab instead. Outside of Shigaraki and Izuku Midoriya, you are all fresh faces to me. Though I doubt Izuku Midoriya ever remembers meeting me since it's so long, the doctor, who said his current name was 𝗬𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 stated, which made Izuku try to focus on where he remembered the voice from. Everyone in the league looked at Izuku to see if he knew the doctor, and then Izuku felt a whisper in his mind that sounded like the first user's. The whisper was Quirk Doctor, which made Izuku's face fill with shock, as the voice indeed did match, and it was the reason he remembered the voice, since it was one of the worst days in his life, as his life changed that day. Indeed, I remember. It's been a long time, doctor, though that does raise questions in my mind that I would like to ask one day. Izuku said, and the doctor made an acknowledging sound, but Izuku nor the doctor mentioned how they knew each other. Indeed, I think I know the question you wish to ask, and the answer is still the same from that day, if you know what I mean, the doctor said, and Izuku nodded his head, since the doctor really had no need to lie to him since he was on Shigaraki's side currently. The doctor then continued on why they were all there, to begin with. I brought you all here out of respect for 𝗵𝗃, as I was one of his confidants. My life, my tech, and my little ones here were all offered to the great 𝗵𝗃 up to now, though he is gone. You have only received the leftovers of my work, the failed projects until now. I have nothing against you, but I have nothing really for you either. I just want to judge you and see if you are worthy of having all of this. The doctor said as Shigaraki nodded his head. However, the doctor wasn't finished just yet, as he spoke once again. As it stands, you are really nothing when you compare it all to the grand scheme of things. You are an 8-year-old child pawing around with the dregs of society, but I need someone far more than that to receive my loyalty and services. The doctor said, and for a while everyone was quiet. Then Shigaraki spoke up, as he talked about not remembering much about his life before meeting the MSTR and the doctor, which the doctor was aware of. Shigaraki explained how he really only remembers how 𝗵𝗃 saved him from the streets and the shell that he was before he was picked up, since everyone else ignored him. He talked about how the hands came to him since the doctor and 𝗵𝗃 gave them back to him, as they were the last remaining thing of his actual family. The story went on, and Izuku could only feel so much regret and hatred as well. Tenko Shimura, who was abandoned by the world and picked up one, the only person willing to pick him up, even though it was most likely out of pettiness against the users. He then became Tamura Shigaraki, who wants to deny the entire world. I'm sorry Nana, but I don't think I can pull him off this path. Even though you wanted me to try, he might be too far gone already. Izuku thought as he listened to Shigaraki speak to the doctor and declare he wanted to destroy everything. Even Toga saw that Shigaraki wanted to destroy everything was a bit off, but Shigaraki said his allies were exceptions. The doctor then leaned forward as he told Shigaraki he passed the test, which confused everyone. Indeed, I was testing you to see if you have grown. If you haven't, then I would have limited what I would have given you, though I must admit you did things outside of expectations when you obtained the legacy on your side. That was one thing that even 𝗵𝗃𝗲 failed at doing for years old, said the doctor, and a shiver went up Izuku's back as he wondered if the doctor would tell them what Izuku was since he was the legacy. Just as Izuku feared, Shigaraki decided to ask what the doctor meant. You keep saying legacy and that I obtained it, but I don't know what you are talking about. The only thing that has changed is the fact that I gained a new ally. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 the legacy. Shigaraki said as he turned to Izuku, who avoided eye contact with Shigaraki and the others. The doctor chuckled as he said that Izuku Midoriya was indeed the legacy. Though I don't know if he wants to talk about it. 𝗵𝗃𝗏 never told you, so I don't know if it is my place to tell you either, so it will be up to the young man if he gives an answer. So what do you say, Izuku Midoriya? The doctor said, putting the decision in Izuku's hand. Doctor. This puts me in a horrible situation, Izuku thought as he turned his head to make eye contact with the other members of the group. Izuku sighed as they all stared at him and he scratched his neck. Doctor had to go and start talking. I will give you part of the answer since I don't want a huge amount of people knowing right now. Not even many on the hero side even know the truth of 𝗵𝗃𝗏, Izuku said, and this caught all of their attention as Shigaraki was interested in learning something about his 𝗵𝗃𝗏. I'm sure the doctor and 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗏 know the full story, but to give it in simple terms, 𝗵𝗃𝗏 had a younger brother who opposed him during the dawn of quirks. 𝗵𝗃𝗏 didn't like this, but his younger brother had been successful in passing, well, let's say his side of the war on down the line. You could consider me an extension of 𝗵𝗃𝗏's younger brother who opposed 𝗵𝗃𝗏 since the dawn of quirks. Each generation has someone like me as long as 𝗵𝗃𝗏 is alive. Your grandmother Nana Shimura was a part of the legacy and so was All Might. I am the current generation of the legacy, but as you have seen I was thrown aside from the hero side, though that is fine since those part of the legacy hasn't always been heroes. In a sense, it's why All Might trained me since he knew what I would end up becoming as he was the previous legacy until me. Izuku said as he hoped this would satisfy them in most of their questions and not have the doctor talk. Though the doctor did clap and laugh. That was a truly amazing way you explained the story. I think I prefer the original one, but your version is an interesting take on the legacy and the 𝗵𝗃𝗏. The doctor said, and Shigaraki nodded his head as he said he was fine with the information he gained so far but would one day like to know the full story, which Izuku nodded his head at, hoping he would never truly have to give it. The doctor took control of the conversation once again and explained that he would be giving everything to Shigaraki as well as the research he had put together to give Shigaraki more power. Though, I can't give you the second thing yet because without a doubt you're all weak still and need to grow a bit stronger. Now, the issue with 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏 is a different story, as if you want everything else then you need to make him submit to you, which will earn everything to use as you see fit. The doctor said as he gave them all a communications device to get a hold of him if they needed him to teleport or something. 𝗳𝗵𝗏 though didn't want to go back to fight 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏 as he didn't want to die next to their leader at the hands of the giant. Though the doctor decided to have 𝗳𝗵𝗏 help test a high-end Nomu instead since he wasn't going back to the fight. They all ended up getting teleported and appeared before 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏 once again, where Shigaraki declared the arrival of the future king, which 𝗳𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗏 said a king must inspire dread, must be strong and must be strong. This was how they ended up fighting the giant once again until they were able to take breaks as the giant really only focused on Shigaraki. As the other members wander and tried to help, Izuku decided to break off for a while. Hey guys, I am going to go use some of the cash the doctor gave us. If we do this we will need some medical supplies to treat our wounds, and I feel like this will take us some time, so we need a place to live as we can't take this fight anywhere near a city, so we will be staying out here for a while. Anyone need anything directly, and remember I can only bring so much since I will fly it over here using black to carry most of it so I don't get tracked down. Izuku said, and they wrote out a list of things they would need. Izuku asked Shigaraki if he wanted anything to add to the list. Shigaraki said just to make sure to get enough supplies and food for them to last out in the forest so they didn't have to make too many trips away, else they would draw attention to the location, which Izuku nodded his head. This was how Izuku slipped away to give a report directly to Gran Torino as he left and sent a message via his network to Nizu.